Hello and welcome to this week's bonus podcast where we will be doing a character profile of Paul Foreman. Apollo, poor Paul, dead.
Oh,
it's gone.
No.
sad times in Coronation Street this week. I don't know how this is going to run really, because I don't want to give too many reactions to Monday's episode in this, because that's what the weekend podcast is for. But we're going to be spending an hour or so this evening having a look back on the life of Apollo. 6 years he's been in the show, and going over some of his big storylines, his highlights, and leading up to this big MND story that finally reached its end this week.
Yep.
I am Michael.
I'm Gemma.
Thought we'd better say that, just in case you're wondering who's talking. It's us. And I am very much looking forward to this. It's when I've kind of got a list of characters that we still haven't done profiles on, and it's a very small list. And just for the past couple of years, it's like, when's going to be the right time to do Paul? And then this storyline was announced, and I was like, I think we're going to save this one until however long Paul has got left, because we didn't have any idea back when the story was announced about a year and a half ago, did we? Just how long this would go on for. And I don't think I'd have ever predicted this long.
Okay. Well, I didn't think it would be a short story.
I didn't think it would be a short story, but I mean, the fact that it made it past Britain's Got Talent week was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't think it would keep going all the way until autumn, but it's been good that it's been extended this long, because you don't get many Corrie stories that do have such a long shelf life. Even, the Stephen Reed story I don't think lasted as long as that was massive. In recent memory, the only comparable one I would say is Yasmin's, which again needed time to play out properly, because the coercive control, that takes place over years. And I think, looking back on it now, they would have really done a bit of a disservice, this MND storyline, if they had nipped it in the bud. We were talking, I think, when it was first announced, how far down, is Paul are we going to see him die because of the complications of MND, or is something else going to happen? We were like, surely they can't have him in wheelchair bound and not being able to speak, and everything they've done, basically. We said, surely they won't, but they have, and I think all credit to everyone behind the scenes at Coronation Street. We've said many times on the podcast in the past year, this has been, my favourite storyline. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know that you've really enjoyed it too. I
think one of the things about the story is it demonstrates one of the strengths of a soap in that it can do a prolonged storyline. And I think Coronation Street has shown it's able to take these long-term stories and give them the space that they need, and they've really done that with Paul's story. And I think many people, I don't think I'm alone in this, hate medical stories, would rather there weren't any in Coronation Street. And I know it sounds silly, because medical issues are a big part of your life if you do have health issues, but Coronation Street didn't have hospital scenes and sets and stuff as much as they do now back in the old days, and it wasn't it wasn't worse for it, was it? But when they announced they were going to do this storyline, I was very sceptical, because it's horrific and harrowing. This condition is terrible, and so I thought that it would just be wall-to-wall misery and suffering, and having to watch somebody die is not my idea of entertainment. No. But because of the humanity, heart and humour that they put into Paul and Billy's story, it's actually been, at times, a joy to watch. Yeah. And I think that's testament both to the writers and the storyliners, but also, obviously, the acting talent.
Thinking back, Corrie obviously does have lots and lots of medical stories, but it still hasn't had too many where characters, we've seen them, have a terminal illness and die on screen.
Yeah, that's true.
Alma is kind of the first big one. There might have been a few small ones.
Well, Vera Lomax.
Yeah, exactly. Back in the 60s. But Alma, I think, set the standard for here's a character a beloved character, and seeing them wasting away until they die. But I remember that was,
until they die. It sounds like you said until they die it.
No.
No.
But even with Alma's story, that was over and done with really quickly, and it got a bit of criticism back in the day for how quickly the character deteriorated and then died, and then it was done. We saw, I mean, Hayley 10 years ago. That was probably about 10 months or so between diagnosis and death, and that did have some of its lighter moments. But I think, like, I totally agree that their decision to keep the humour in it, and that fits in with MND in a way. Not that, you know, I'm not saying that it's a funny disease, but the fact that inside your body, and you can't, you know, you're still you. It doesn't. It's not a brain affecting condition for many of its sufferers, and I think they say, well, Paul is still gonna stay Paul right until the end, and he you know, he's a funny guy. He's got a good sense of humour, and they kept that. So yeah, what could have been a really depressing story, miserable story. I mean, I think we had Sinead. That was another one that it was a really, really effective story, but it was a really tough watch a lot of the time. And although this one obviously still was at times, there was still so much to enjoy and smile about it as well.
One thing I'll say about this story, and it sounds like a bit of a stupid cliche, but I genuinely believe that this is what's made this story so compelling, is that it wasn't about death, it was about life. It was about Paul's life and how he dealt with the challenges that came up. And, you know, I'm going to say maybe something a bit rude here about poor Paul, but I think doing that with Hayley, I think they didn't do that with Hayley because she was such a beloved character. It was really, really hard for everyone to watch her go. Whereas I think Paul wasn't hugely a popular person, so there was more room to kind of grow this attachment.
Yeah.
There was nowhere for anyone to go with Hayley. Everyone loved Hayley. You couldn't love Hayley more.
You're absolutely right, and that was certainly been my experience.
You weren't
I wasn't mega keen on Paul beforehand, and I'm so pleased to have been a convert. I think one of my initial reactions when this story came in is like, oh, we're gonna see a lot of Paul, because I didn't not like him, but I remember when he first came onto the street, I had some weird. I took against him for a little bit. I remember his very first scene. Well, not in this prison cell with David, but when he came back onto the street later, he was in the cafe and he nicked a fiver that somebody had dropped on the floor, and he was being quite antagonistic to Gemma, wasn't he? And it really kind of set me up against him. And although I don't hold that much of a grudge that picking up a fiver off the floor is going to make me not like a character for 5 years, but I wasn't on the Paul train. I liked him, but he wasn't one of my favourites. But just over the past 18 months, it's changed completely. And it does go to show that, you know, any character, given the right story, really can shine. And this is a perfect example for me. I know there were loads of Paul fans before, of course there were, but I think that I'm sad that the story's over, but I'm really, really pleased that I got the opportunity to love Paul, and he's you know, my favourite character.
I don't think it's unfair to say he's got more fans now.
Yes.
You know, I wouldn't say he was unpopular as a character before this storyline started, but I would have said that he's one of many background seeming characters that add a bit of, you know, colour and life to the show, but very rarely get their own story. Yeah,
it's like Ryan, isn't it? Yeah. You know, 18 months ago, around the same time, we were saying, what on earth is going on with Ryan? We think that Ryan Prescott is great, but that he desperately needs a story, and he wasn't a really beloved character. But, you know, fast forward 3-4 months, hitting the face with acid, and everyone singing his praises and saying, "Oh, give Ryan all the awards." So yeah, I think we saw the same thing with Paul, really, and yeah, fair play to Peter Ash, because he's been absolutely outstanding. So do
you think Coronation Street, in order to capitalise on, you know, the qualities of a character and their actor, do you think for women they give them mental trauma, but for men they have to go through some kind of physical trauma for everyone to...
Maybe it is. Maybe that's the trick.
Right, should we do some statistics?
Yeah, let's talk about Paul. We're going to run down his story history like we always do with these profiles, but you're right, statistics first. Over to you.
He was born on the 24th 4th of August, 1990. Usually I don't trust anyone born after 1989, but I'm making an exception.
Make an exception for Paul.
I have to start making exceptions for anyone born before the millennium now, don't I? Because they're proper adults. Right, parents, Danny Foreman and Bernie Winter. Siblings, he only had one before last year, but now he's got a new one.
Well, he's just
Kit
kind of
Green,
gained them
half
as
brother.
his story's gone on. Because when he first came into the show for those 3 episodes in the prison with David, he wasn't Gemma's brother, was he? He was just a cellmate.
Yeah.
Then he came back and he's like, oh, I'm actually Gemma's twin. And now he's got another one.
Yeah, he was born with Gemma, they're twins. And he married Billy Mayhew in 2023. First appeared on the 11th of May 2018. I don't know if he's going to make any after death
Any
appearances.
posthumous. Let's assume not. Let's say Monday the 9th of September 2024 is going to be his final appearance.
He was in 603 episodes and he was played by Peter Ash.
Yes, he certainly was. Peter Ash. Lots of people knew him from a few of the other programmes that he'd been in before Coronation Street. We have a very narrow TV what's the word? Range. But so we'd never seen him in anything before. But he'd been doing a load of things and he's got famous cousin and everything. So Peter is a proper Manc lad, born and bred. He's from Moston, Greater Manchester, and William Ash is his celebrity cousin. William Ash. Second cousin, of course, sorry, yeah. He's actually been in Emmerdale for a couple of years now. He plays Caleb Milligan in Emmerdale. But he had done a bit of Coronation Street himself beforehand. He played a boy called Spike in August 1987. And he was also, and some of you might remember this, there was a story, I think it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, when a load of the oldies, Rita and Emily and Blanche and Betty, I think it was, were held up at gunpoint in the back of a car out in the middle of the country. And that was William Ash who played him as well. But I think he's probably best known from people who watch it as playing Christopher Mead and Waterloo Road, and as I said, Emmerdale as well. Peter himself, though, he also had the acting gene in the Ash family, I guess, and he did school plays when he was young. He was in amateur theatre groups, but his first TV appearance was in a 2003 episode of Blue Murder. Then he was in Casualty for a bit, just like a little 6-episode role. But Footballers' Wives was what saw him shoot to stardom. He played a character called Darius Fry there. Darius Fry, exactly.
That sounds made up.
He played him between 2003 and 2006. And we saw a picture of him that I sent you one, didn't I?
It's so funny. He looks so young.
Really, really young. And it was a picture of him and some of the other characters in it. And Ben Price was there as well, playing a very young, blonde, spiky-haired character footballer.
Footballers' Wives is such a funny show because I've never seen it. I've only ever heard about it. And is it just Hollyoaks with football?
I think that's what it is in my head.
Yeah, because I know that Alison King was in it.
Yes.
Before, and when she came into the show, she came in into Corrie. She came in with this reputation of like, oh, she's in Footballers' Wives. Like it was some big catch for Corrie because of how sexy and wonderful Footballers' Wives was. But
never seen it.
I don't want to see it because I like to imagine. I think I prefer to just keep it in my imagination.
With football.
Yeah.
So he did that.
And also, if you were to ask me what Hollyoaks is, I don't know, I've never seen it. It's Footballers' Wives without football.
Basically, yeah, I think you're right. I think we got it cracked. So after Footballers' Wives, Peter Ash went on to a few smaller roles, including The Royal. He was in Hollyoaks. He's also done a lot of theatre work as well, including the Royal National Theatre's touring production of Warhorse, which I hear is quite good.
Sounds depressing.
I think it probably is, but it's got an amazing...
I bet the horse dies at the end.
Quite possibly, I don't know. Yeah, it's got an amazing... puppety horsey thing in it. Anyway,
Puppet.
So he had quite an acting pedigree before he came into Coronation Street, but 2018 was when he first made his appearance on the Cobbles. Well, not exactly in the Cobbles, in the cells, wasn't he?
That's right. Was this filmed at the place we went? It was, wasn't it?
Oh, what, Shrewsbury Prison?
Yeah, I think
No, I think...
Was this not where the riot happened?
Oh, yes, you're right, it was. This was the riot. I don't know whether these particular scenes were at Shrewsbury Prison or whether it was just the riot that was. But yes, this was when David had been banged up for...
Do you know the reason why they don't film at Shrewsbury Prison anymore and they've built their own sets in situ?
Yeah.
It's because it's really haunted at Shrewsbury Prison and they're scared of ghosts.
Is that true, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to do this?
Yeah, go 2000.
He was born in 1990 as Apollo Winter, with his twin sister Gemini, grows up on the Paul Robeson estate in Wythenshawe with Gemma and Bernie. Denny's left because we find out this year that Bernie had a one-night stand that resulted in her becoming pregnant with a third child that she called Zodiac, born in 1993, who was given up for adoption.
This is Kit.
That's Kit. So, when as a child, Paul was groomed by Kel Hinchley, who was Bernie's partner, and he starts causing trouble to retaliate. Kel leaves Bernie, and this makes a lot of, hassle for everybody. He leaves home at age 14 to go and live with his dad, and he changes his surname to Foreman. Then we get, again, off screen, Gemma burgles an old lady's house. The lady dies of a heart attack. Paul says it was him what done it, and he gets sent to prison for manslaughter, which is where he meets his new friend in 2018.
There was a lot of backstory that we learned as Paul spent a bit longer on the street, because he first came in as very much an extra, was it? He was in it for 3 episodes in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, kind of
there
like...
was no backstory developed for him.
Like if suddenly Roy's friend, I've forgotten his name, in prison... The one who betrayed him.
Roscoe, wasn't it?
Yeah, Roscoe, whatever. If he suddenly pitched up on the street and then becomes a beloved character in 8 years' time or however long, I wouldn't be surprised, because this is what Corrie likes to do. If somebody really shines... The same thing happened with Abby, Sally Carmen's character. I don't know that she was supposed to be a big part of the show, but because she was so great...
Yeah, kept her on. It happens a lot.
She hadn't done any acting. Nobody knew who she was. She wasn't famous at all. She hadn't been in a very popular television show. It was only because me and Michael noticed that she was actually quite good at acting, and we praised her on our podcast, that she got more work.
Is this true? You're making it up.
I'm fairly sure. I'm fairly sure that's how it happened.
I was saying about Paul's backstory, and when we saw him in prison with David, there was no indication about what he was in for, and I think we were supposed to believe, he is a criminal, he's committed a crime. But it was probably in 2019 when he came back into Corrie that we learned, he was just in there taking the rap for Gemma. The fact that Gemma has kind of inadvertently caused this old lady to have a heart attack.
Well, hang on a minute.
That kind of is a bit troubling for me.
It's not so much like, she accidentally died. Kind of like what Emma and whatever did to that poor man. Like, that was kind of almost the same thing, but this is so bad that somebody went to prison for it. I know, and Gemma's just, thanks, bro. You can kind of hand wave it a little bit and go, well, old ladies always dying, aren't they? Probably just completely coincidence that she was burgled and then died afterwards. But the very fact that there was a prison, there's a trial and evidence to prove that this actually was so horrific for this poor lady that she died, and Gemma's like, well, got out of that one. I know. It does establish Paul as a very benevolent character, doesn't it? And I think as we see what he gets up to over his 5-6 years on Coronation Street, that's something that does stay with him. He has definitely got a good heart, and going to prison for his sister was an early example of that. I'm surprised really that on his deathbed, Paul didn't try to just confess that it was Gemma what done it and it wasn't actually his fault. Just drop her in it. Do you think that's why she was at the hospital going, don't say a word, bro? So we also, this thing that you said about going to live with Denny, the whole character of Denny really was a very last minute addition to the show this year. Well, hang on. All the way through, people were saying, why did Gemma and Paul have different surnames? And I don't think it was... They did explain this. They did explain this fairly early on. Did they? I'm pretty sure they did. I'm not convinced I also don't think it takes a... Yes, they did. It doesn't take a genius to work out why a brother and sister might have different surnames if they come from a... No, it didn't. We could assume if we weren't told. Well, yeah. But I'm pretty sure that we knew that they weren't... Well, look, that's Paul's backstory, and there's not much to say really for 2018. He was only in 3 episodes of Coronation Street, or 2 days worth, so barely in it at all. He had 4 scenes, so we didn't get to see much of him at all. David was in prison having a bit of a rough time. This was after he'd beaten up Gary Windass, and the pair don't get on very well at first. David's mad about being locked up. He don't want to share a cell. Eventually, though, he kind of says to Paul,
I could do with a mate, actually. And Paul tells him, there's no mates in here, man. We're all on our own. There was one scene where David's lying down in his bunk and Paul comes over to him and kind of gently tries to wake him up. And David like pushes him up against the wall because he's just so, stressed out by being behind bars. And Paul seemed then to be a nice character. It's a bit of a toss-up, isn't it, if you're a Corrie character and you get sent into prison? You could either get someone who's nice and helpful, or you could end up with somebody you don't want to go to sleep. You sleep with one eye open because of them sharing a cell with him. But Paul seemed nice, but we didn't really get to find out anything about him.
It's quite funny to think that in that prison cell, actually, David was the most dangerous one.
Yeah.
Do you not think?
So, late in 2019, we found that Paul was coming back. And I think it was the 1st of January 2019 that he made his first regular appearance. So it was about, 6-7 months after we'd last seen him. 2019's Paul's story was really about his reintroduction to the street, being rehabilitated, and also the expansion of the family, because Bernie also made an appearance in that year as well. We get to see him dating Billy. So there's lots of family building. And Ian McLeod as producer then, it looked like he really wanted to develop the Winter family. We saw an awful lot of Gemma and Chesney that year, didn't we? And bringing in the brother and the mum would make sense to me, because lots of people liked Gemma back around that time. So giving her an expanded family, not a bad move, I would say, from Ian McLeod.
Expanding the Winterverse.
Exactly this. The big story, of course, that we saw from Paul in 2019 was the historical sexual abuse that he received at the hand of Kel. So it was a bit of a real heavy start for him, to be honest.
Dropped him right in it at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's always been a really serious character, which is funny because he's such a kind of happy-go-lucky guy.
There was an article in The Sun when his return was announced, and an insider said to them, bosses were really impressed by Peter and viewers loved him. It was a no-brainer to bring him back for a longer stint. So he'd said, Peter Ash was quoted as saying, over the moon to do a little bit. I did it earlier this year with David in the prison, so when I got a call to check my availability, I couldn't believe it. As a Mancunian actor, it's a dream job. At first I thought I'll just be back for a few episodes, but when I heard it was for longer than that, and that Paul is actually Gemma's twin brother, it was amazing. It's all going really well, and I'm enjoying it massively.
Aww.
Yeah, this twin brother thing, I can't remember how long Gemma had been in the show at this point. I mean, it must have been at least 5 years, probably. No mention of a twin brother at all, but much like Daisy coming in as Jenny's supposed stepdaughter, you just have to kind of imagine they only talked about them when the cameras weren't on.
You don't talk about people necessarily.
I know, but the thing is about a soap, it's supposed to be delving into all aspects of a family life, and you think it might come up, but never mind. So lots of people at the time kind of made a comparison between Paul and Graham Proctor, because it certainly looks like if you're a cellmate of David Platt, you got a not bad chance of being brought back into the show when you come out, because we'd seen that, hadn't we, 10 years before. Graham Proctor, played by Craig Casey, he'd been in prison with David, then he came out and had a jolly old time afterwards.
David's gone to prison too much.
Yeah, I think this is the moral of this.
That's what I'm getting out of
David, keep your nose clean.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you meet people like Graham and Paul, we don't really mind too much. So, Paul shows up on the street.
We can't just wait for you to go to prison again to get some happy, cool, fun, carefree guy to be in the show for a few years.
So Paul comes up on the street. He's not particularly, as I say before, I wasn't impressed by him at first. He seemed kind of dodgy. He was quite intimidating. He was on a hunt down Gemma. I can't remember why in the end. I don't know whether it was just a case of I've been in prison for you or what, but she isn't pleased to see that he's around. I mean, I guess one of the reasons why the show would say we hadn't heard her talk about him is because the last time they saw each other they weren't on good terms. So when she finds out that not only is he back on the street, that he's also got a job packing in Underworld, she's really, really not pleased. And this job packing in Underworld was all thanks to a Vicarly intervention by Billy. So right from Paul's very first moment, Billy played such an important part in his life, in his rehabilitation from prison. So it's kind of nice and puts a lovely bow on it that their story was the climax of Paul's time in Weatherfield as well.
You keep saying rehabilitation from prison, but can you be rehabilitated if you didn't do a crime?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say maybe.
Maybe be rehabilitated from lying about doing crimes.
Yes. So Paul is also a little bit reluctant to get the help from Billy, because he finds out that he's a vicar, and Paul back then, he's seen the light since, hasn't he? But he wasn't much one for religion back in his early days on the street. But he soon forgives them.
Religion's great. I admire people who have faith. I hold nothing against anybody, but I do think that vicars are a bit like people that are involved in an MLM. You're kind of like, they're really nice to you, but you're always scared they've got an ulterior motive and they want to sign you up to start spreading
He
the
made
good
it
word.
in the end. He did it in the end. It took 5 years.
Exactly.
Paul got himself
So
baptised.
it was right to be wary of him. He was playing the long game.
Billy was playing the long game.
He's like, I'm going to marry you and make you a Christian.
Paul, when I was looking through the Corripedia to find my notes, I'd forgotten this, but Paul actually threatened to hurt Chesney because Gemma tried to get Paul fired from Underworld, and he's like, I'm going to beat up Chesney if you do.
I think Chesney just invokes that reaction. I want to beat Chesney up.
Now, we get to find out about Paul's sexuality quite early on, because all the girls fancy him, don't they? Especially Izzy. I remember him being at the factory and everyone going, oh, who's this?
Is he from Football as well?
Yeah, I think I recognise him off the TV. In fact, but that neck as well. No, so he's like, sorry, you're not my type. We realise pretty soon that he's gay when he starts going after Billy. He also, later that year, gets into a bit of dodgy business by stealing a ring from Roy. So this is after Roy's mum Sylvia's died, and Roy's looking through all of her effects, and Paul finds this ring, and he sells it onto Big Garth at the market for £200. But then when he finds out that it's actually worth 20 times that much, he and Gemma and Chesney and Emma all work together to bring it back. And I think this is possibly what unites the twins again, working together to get this ring from Big Garth.
Re-steal a stolen
a stolen ring. So yeah, he wasn't above
just because,
a little bit of petty theft. And I suppose it does come back when he starts stealing the cars last year.
Yeah, just because he didn't actually kill an old lady doesn't mean he's not a crim.
Yeah, exactly. So Paul says, right, me and Gemma, we've buried the hatchet, gonna move in here, quite like it around this street. Moves in with Gemma at Rita's flat.
Rita, obviously, can I just say, she gets fed up with Paul living there, so he has to move out to the Bale hostel that never opened.
Yeah.
But she obviously never liked him and always held a grudge, because have you seen her since he got his diagnosis? No. Has she come to visit him? No. Does she care? Doesn't seem to give two hoots about Paul. Obviously, he did something heinous when he lived there. Like, maybe he never flushed the toilet or something. Or, like, kept using teaspoons and bending them to get the tea out of the tea bags like you do.
Oh, thanks. So Rita does hold a grudge.
Rita hates Paul. I bet she's going to go to the funeral and spit on his grave. That's how evil she is.
Rita just sits there and kind of smiles as she sees everybody die before her.
Yeah, Rita's like, just another one on the bedpost. Rita also probably couldn't think of anything wise to say about somebody dying before their time of MND that wouldn't sound horribly offensive and trite, so she just kept her mouth shut.
Quite possibly. So this Bale Hostel storyline, they were supposed to open it, was it where the funeral home is now? That was
I thought it was going to be...
where Shuttleworth's is.
I thought it was going to be in... where
I thought it was opposite Red Bank, because Claudia bought one of the Red Bank apartments.
You're right.
Didn't Imran trick her out of it? Or
Imran was also
remember.
dodgy.
He was
and also dead.
Anyway, Paul and Billy start dating before long, and then they win a Mr. and Mrs. contest at the Rovers, which is, I guess, a bit of a poor show for all the other candidates who actually have been going out for quite a long time. Clearly, they were soulmates, yeah. So We had a storyline as well, a little bit, where a mate of Paul's called Marley sells him a pair of headphones to give to Billy as a present, because Paul has a win on the fruit machine, so he's able to buy these things. Sean, though, because, you might suspect Paul, he's come out of prison,
Suddenly got
he's
money.
already been a bit involved in a bit of dodgy business. Sean suspects him of stealing from the medical centre collection box. So investigating officers almost catch Marley with a load of stolen goods in his flat, and in retaliation, Marley punches Sean because Paul's told him about Sean not believing him about this fruit machine win. It was very, very complex. But basically, when Billy learns about this, he shops Marley to the police, and then Paul dumps him for reporting his mate. What a load of drama.
When you were reading about this storyline, were you really tempted to just drop it until you realised it led to Paul dumping Billy? And thought, I can't really have to put this in.
I'm gonna say I don't really remember this too much. I think I've got a memory of Sean getting punched in the face.
No, I don't.
Yeah, trouble basically seemed to follow Paul back then. And then it came in the form of Bernie. So Bernie Winter, she's one of the things that one of the grudges that Kit holds against her at the moment is abandoning him when she'd agreed to meet him about 10 years ago. And Kit can't shut up about this.
Nope.
But this isn't the first time that Bernie had been seen doing this, because I can't remember why it was that Gemma and Paul wanted to get in touch with Bernie again, but they agreed to meet her up on the Red Wreck, don't they? And they sit around waiting for her, and she doesn't turn up. But before long, she does find them in, I think it was in the pub, because she owes rent money and she tries to cadge them off her kids. Bernie, another character who morally questionable, still dabbles, but I think she's grown more of a good heart since living among the community of Weatherfield. Paul clearly doesn't like Bernie, though, at this stage because of their bad blood from when he lived with her when he was a young boy. But despite this, Gemma says, right, you can come and live with me at number 5. She's left Reeters as well at this point. I think this is when she's probably going out with Chesney now at this point. Bernie, wrong 'un. Shoplifter.
Gets caught. That's the worst, isn't it? You're okay. It's a KV
failed shoplifter. But this is the beginning of the Kel story, because Kel was her partner from back in the day who was a security guard, and he's the one that catches her. Bernie, brilliant, reunited with my old lover Kel, but and Gemma's happy to have him in her life again too.
Just to be clear, we had no inkling until Paul reveals
we didn't know.
Like Kel. So Kel was just this kind of, he was all right. He's just a nice guy.
I didn't like him.
I don't remember if you're supposed to like him or not. But we don't know why Paul's got such a deal. What's the problem?
Yeah, and over the course of episodes or weeks, we learn about this horrific sexual abuse that he was subjected to by Kel as when he was a young boy. And Kel's there, obviously desperately trying to cover this up because nobody knows about it. He says, Paul, look, we know what we had was really special. We need to put it behind us.
I mean, this is when it becomes of
yes.
You can't have a relationship with a 14-year-old.
No, absolutely not.
No.
There was
you're 14.
I remember they photoshopped quite a good picture of a young Paul Foreman with a young Kel kind of together at that point. But anyway, Paul eventually opens up to Billy about what happened because Paul has put Kel into a coma at this point. Again, little bit angry, a little bit gruff. I mean, I guess it's going to scar you mentally going through something like that. But Paul had literally beaten Kel up, put him in a coma, and Billy says, you got to tell the police everything that happened to have caused you to react this way. So Kel wakes up from the coma. He doesn't tell the police that it was Paul who attacked him because he obviously doesn't want the truth about what happened in the past to come out. Paul's not going to confess to it, and instead he decides to flee the area. But he is stopped by Billy and Summer, and Kel moves down south. Hooray, that's not the last we see of him though. Meanwhile though, we get to find out a little bit more about David in prison. He gets into a prison riot. This was the one that we were referring to earlier, filmed at Shrewsbury Prison. Brilliant episode, but it all kind of comes to a head when David's rapist, Josh, is there, and he gets attacked. Paul finds out about this, goes to visit Josh in hospital and tells him, look, you need to back off David, because Josh was saying that David had attacked him and it wasn't. And Paul says, I've got mates in here, I've got contacts, I can make sure that the rest of your stay in prison is hell, so just leave him alone.
David's still in prison?
I think, yeah.
I'm really confused.
I think David just was in and out of prison on numerous occasions. This time he was in prison because of stealing Audrey's money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was back again.
I see.
I found this, I'm going to say, a little bit difficult to believe because Paul, although we'd seen him be a bit roughy-tufty, I think that him going and standing over Josh in prison and saying, I've got prison guards in my pocket, basically, that didn't sit right to me. It was a nice easy way to have Josh back off David and not, and retract his statement that David had attacked him. But I don't think that Josh would be scared of Paul.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that, and I'm Paul doesn't strike me as the sort of person who would be on such good terms with the prison guards that he could make these kind of threats.
I believe that he would threaten, though. I do. If this happened to your best friend, and you know that you've been inside and you know what works, this would work. You don't have to actually have prison guards in your pocket to tell somebody you do.
Just you saying that reminded me that I wish they had made more of the friendship between David and Paul.
I think they did a good job as with limited time to make everyone aware that this is still a friendship. I know everyone keeps saying they wish they'd seen more of David and Paul in his final months, but Corey's done a good job.
He appeared occasionally.
There's so limited time for anything.
But it's not just in the final months that I'm talking about. Like throughout the 5 years. Yeah, but that's just
Corey all over. I agree with you.
Throughout the 5 years, though, we just didn't see much of it. Anyway, so later that month, Cal makes a return to Weatherfield, and Paul's like, "I'm not having anything to do with you." And Bernie is a little bit confused about this. What's going on? So Paul, meanwhile, is realising how helpful Billy's been to him through this whole ordeal. They get back together again and they move in with each other. Bernie starts suspecting Kel around this point because she's got a job cleaning at the church and some money goes missing from it, and also some parishioners' houses get broken into. So she and Gemma go snooping around in Kel's flat, find all the stuff that he'd nicked, and finds a box. I think it was high up on a shelf somewhere, and it's full of these are pictures of naked boys, including Paul. So this is when she realises, oh my gosh, Kel's a paedophile, and she didn't know. She had no idea. She had no idea that this was going on.
Well, Paul hadn't told her this, and he does explain why when he confesses. And then Kel gets arrested.
Kel gets arrested, but then he gets released due to a lack of evidence. I don't know what more evidence you need.
There's a box.
Yeah, but it did lead to the final comeuppance of him, I suppose, which was Bernie posing as a 14-year-old boy online and doing a bit of catfishing when Kel advertises DJ lessons. So we end 2019 with Bernie trying to trick Kel into showing that he's still trying to attract young boys.
I thought this was a real wasted opportunity of a storyline because these I don't know what you call them, there's a special name, but the people that try to trap these kind of criminals by posing online and then arranging to meet and and then they sometimes they will attack people. It's a real interesting concept for a soap to do a storyline about. But they never really...
No, it kind of... what happens with the entrapment plays out in early 2020. Yeah. What kind of are your overall impressions of this whole historic sexual abuse story? Because I remember thinking it was maybe just a little bit too heavy too soon. And you got to be really careful when you introduce new characters. And, Kel was new. I know he was just a side character. Bernie, Paul, all relatively new, and having something a really dark history. I would have liked to have grown to have loved the characters a little bit more before being told, well, look at all this trauma that they went through. I thought that the actors all did a fantastic job portraying it. Peter Ash already showing himself to be absolute star performer. I think because this is not long after this that he wins the National Television Award for Best Newcomer, so he clearly made a good impression. And sometimes you do need these traumatic, big, stories to show your acting chops.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a fan of that story particularly. What do you think?
It's a heavy story. Like you said, it is. There are all new characters, and it can be difficult to connect to them as well as you would do as a character you've known for a long time. And Corey is kind of like a kid in a toy shop sometimes with these new characters. Like, here's my new toy. This is the backstory of the you know, I'm gonna play with them for 6 months and then I'm gonna forget they exist, put them in a cupboard and don't touch them for, you know, months, years even. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
The same thing's happening with Lauren and
Betsy.
all those characters. They're all new and they've got all these big issues led storylines and then gone. The impact would have been greater if it had been a character that we knew, and also the adult, if we had known them too. I don't know if it would have been too heavy. I don't know who they could have possibly sacrificed for that story to have made sense.
Yeah. It was really dark, and sometimes we don't mind that on Coronation Street, but sometimes it just makes for a bit uncomfortable viewing. But I suppose,
That's the
these
point.
things are supposed to be uncomfortable, aren't they?
Well, I know that people say, oh, it should challenge you, and if you're not comfortable, that's good, and you shouldn't. But also, this is a soap, it is supposed to be light at times. We can't just bash people over the head with stuff and say it's their fault if they don't like it. I don't know. Have they done something like this before? It's really important storyline. I think it's really important. And Peter Ash had spoken to people from... it feels like every year this poor guy is going off to some charity to ask them questions about a storyline that Coronation Street's given him, because he went to Survivors Manchester to talk about the experience that they had so he could get his performance right. And he did end up speaking to somebody who had a pretty similar experience to Paul. And he was saying it was important for me to talk about all the conflicting emotions and not accepting or realising it was abuse until later on in life.
Yeah.
And I guess also the other thing about it is we learn new things about abuse and how people cope as mental health becomes more important and a focus. Because I think I don't know that you could have done the storyline necessarily previously, because our understanding changes so much. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, you can't just never do heavy stories.
Yeah, no. Sometimes they hit right, and for me, this it's not that I'm not criticising it at all.
It's certainly not anyone's fault if you don't like this story. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you didn't connect to it. And sometimes you can have all the right ingredients, but if you're making, I don't know, a peach pie and you don't like peaches, it's not going to work, is it?
Right, 2020 then. So the year of the pandemic. The story here was basically the end of Cal and then Todd coming in to drive a wedge between Billy and Paul. But like I said, the year started off well for Peter Ash, who got his NTA for Best Newcomer. And he said at the time, because they were saying, well done, you're a newcomer, you're going to stay in Corrie forever, or is this going to be a springboard to bigger, better things? And he said, I'd like to be there as long as they'd like to have me, so long may it continue.
Dead.
I mean, it's still 4 years, is that long? I don't know. But yeah, he was certainly had his feet right under the table and was having a blast of a time there. So, 2020, what happened with Paul then, Gemma?
Yeah, so with Paul's help, Bernie entraps Cal, turns up at the park to meet this child with alcohol and condoms, and the police they're there to capture him, but they say, look, you could have jeopardised this case because you're messing around. Billy tells Paul that he'd be better off trying to move on from this instead of trying to get revenge. I don't really know.
That's the last that we see of Cal, isn't it?
Then they have the twins' 30th birthday party, and Gemma plans a surprise party. Don't know why Paul didn't plan a surprise party. I'd be offended. And they have a banging time dancing to Let's Get Ready to Rumble.
That was a nice moment. Like, everything with Gemma and Paul, I think that, despite the fact that before Paul came into the show, we had no inkling that Gemma had a twin brother. I think that they really gelled well. They had great chemistry on screen, didn't they? I mean, it shone no better than this week
I
for
know.
Paul's final scenes. And Dolly Rose Campbell broke my heart with some of the stuff that she was
Brilliant.
saying there on Paul's deathbed. But I really, really did love their relationship together, and the fact that when Paul came into it, there was a lot of antagonism between them, and then that led to this 30th birthday party dancing to PJ and Duncan in the street. It was great. It was really, really great.
Yeah, they're very sweet together.
Yeah.
There's a very special bond there.
Yeah.
But, from happiness to sadness or tragedy, because Cal's body gets dredged up from the
Cal,
canal.
it's all right.
Well, it sets Paul off. He starts drinking again, and he's upset with Billy because Billy's like, "Did you do that? Did you push him in?"
It must have really raised some conflicting emotions, because Paul didn't know what was going on really when he was 14, and he was
groomed,
committed to this.
He was
this abusive
manipulated. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
He thought for a time that he loved this guy,
Yeah.
and then he kind of grew up and realised, hang on a minute, I think that
wasn't
I was
what
good.
I thought
That
it was.
wasn't right. Now the guy's dead.
Yep.
It's gonna really mess with your head.
It did mess with his head, and he gets really in trouble, doesn't he? Then Billy's concerned because Paul starts volunteering at a helpline for troubled teenagers, and this is to sort of overcome and kind of give back to the community. Paul finds it really tough. Some of the role-playing exercises he has to do to prepare mirror what he went through with Cal, but then Billy decides that he should carry on, so he encourages him.
So this was another example of Paul being a good guy at heart.
This kind of annoyed you, though. You didn't you called him a do-gooder, and you said he was
I know. I did. I think that.
I think being worthy can kind of we're both horrible. So when
I'm lovely.
When someone's worthy, it's kind of like
Yeah, I don't know why it rubbed me up the wrong way.
In a soap. In real life, we need people like Paul to be doing stuff like that. But yeah, but I didn't mind at all. I thought it was great. I think it's just Michael that's horrible.
So there was this troubled teenagers hotline, wasn't he? And,
Right,
and
so
that ended up causing
This is a bad
whole
move,
load of trouble.
because it's a soap, so nothing good comes out of it really.
Well, this is also the time that Todd's come back to the street. Isn't it?
That's right, with a new head.
New head, Todd.
He's been hiding in the bushes all along.
And when he was in it last, he was in a relationship with. I'm pretty sure he was in a relationship with Billy, and that just kind of obviously fizzled out when he disappeared. So he comes back to Weatherfield, and he finds that his ex has got a new man.
Right, so he doesn't like that at all. He gets Todd gets a sales executive job at Underworld because there's a whole marketing and sales department that's just full of random people that don't do anything.
Yeah. Toya, Michael Bailey.
Yeah. Todd.
Everyone, yeah.
So he causes an accident for Paul, who's working in the packing room, and goes to help him, makes himself look like the good guy. Then he causes trouble for Paul by getting him drunk and getting him dressed up in Billy's robes, which annoys Billy because Todd's always had this antagonistic relationship with Billy's faith, which Paul didn't have, even though Paul was never religious at all. He didn't get annoyed about it like Todd did, and I really kind of like that that aspect of Todd's personality. I think it's interesting. What's the juxtaposition between those two characters, which is why I think that as relationship.
I think that
he's mellowed,
matured a bit.
He definitely has, but he definitely had this kind of like atheist edgelord attitude to Billy being religious, which was kind of fun to watch because he got so annoyed about it. Todd gets Billy gets the archdeacon's job. Even though he'd walked in, the bishops had walked in on a drunk, half-naked Paul in the flat at one point. You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that.
But Billy's like, no, I don't want the nice house that comes with it. I would rather live in a flat that ends up trapping my husband.
I think
because it doesn't have a garden.
Don't they use the archdeacon's house for?
It was for homeless people,
halfway house or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what they should all be used for, isn't it? But
so this helpline story then introduces the character of Will.
Yes.
Who's the troublemaker that's
troubled troublemaker.
Yeah. He's not that troubled. He's more of. He poses as a troubled teenager, but really he was a little. He was a little scamp that for some reason was under Todd's control. But then when he decided that he wanted to maybe profit for himself from it. Todd didn't know what to do with
He
them.
created a monster.
Yeah.
So he persuades Will to pose as a victim of violent abuse from his father and phone up the helpline and get Paul to help him. So Will manages to get Paul to give him his own private number so that he can talk to him when he's not at work. And the two end up meeting face to face. And Paul's like, oh, this is bad because I don't really know how to help you.
Yeah, Paul fell for this hook, line and sinker.
Well, he's a
I
good
can't remember
guy,
how old.
Michael.
I don't remember how old Will was supposed to be. He was like 14 or so, but he was so devious, wasn't he?
He was great. I loved him.
I
He
mean,
was an evil
was he
protege.
groomed by Todd?
I kind of
groomed
hope.
into evilness.
Wouldn't it be great if Will came back one day? Because he was evil.
Yeah, for such a young boy.
He made Todd look like a choir boy, didn't he? Right, so Paul...
So yeah, Paul's thinking this poor kid, because there was a whole kind of thing of, should I give him my personal number, and I'm going against the policy of this.
I'm doing it for the greater good.
Yeah, my heartstrings have been plucked so much that I just can't help it. Because then it's because Will's situation mirrored his.
Yeah, so he goes to confront Will's stepfather. He takes the underworld van and drives somewhere where he's supposed to meet
he
up.
thinks he's confronting his stepfather, when obviously their stepfather who's been abusing Will doesn't actually exist.
So he tries to break in, he damages a window frame, and the guy who lives there is like, what the hell are you doing? I'm not an evil stepfather, I'm just a man with a house that's got a damaged window. He punches Paul in the face and Paul gets arrested.
No, Paul punches him in the face.
Oh, all right, Paul punches him in the face. And Paul gets arrested, charged with criminal damage and assault. But sadly for Todd, this doesn't work to his ends, and Paul and Billy just become closer.
Yes. I'd really forgotten how much Paul and Billy were a couple. Because
Me too.
I know that at the beginning of the MND story, they quickly engineered a reunion for Billy and Paul. But I'd completely forgotten that they, for the vast majority of the time that Paul was in the show, he was on one arm of Billy.
I totally forgot it too. I was like, oh yeah, they're just a new couple. They'd always been a bit of a thing about them, but I didn't. I totally forgot that one of the first people he ever was interested in. When he came on the show was Billy. So the fact they ended up together was really quite sweet. And the thing about it is that that this love triangle between Paul, Billy, and Todd was
the bit of Sean thrown in occasionally.
Yeah, it could only begin in 2020 when Todd comes back. So there were 2 years when he wasn't there at all. But the love triangle, I think it grew weary after a while. But it did end up turning into the 3 gay dads, which was...
Oh, yeah, that was the 2020, iconic. 2021 3 gay dads of Paul and Billy and I mean, only rivalled, I think, by Eva, Toya and Leanne in the pub.
The trios are really a good solid thing to have on Corrie, and I don't do enough of it, really, because I think at one point they were influenced a little bit by the amount of partnership awards there were for soaps. And they weren't always to do with couples. They were, comedy partnerships or whatever. But trios can be really great.
Well, Ina, Minnie and Martha, the original.
Exactly. From the very beginning, Coronation Street was good at that. But more of it, please, Coronation Street. Yeah,
I think that Todd... Because Todd so often did manage to get his own way, and I think one of the things that made him popular, even when Bruno Langley played him, was that he was so devious, but he was likeable, and he wasn't like master criminal evil, but he was sneaky, and it was quite fun to root for him. But with this, you kind of wanted Billy and Paul to stay together, and it was also then quite fun to see Todd just failing, and no more so than 2021, which was the year of the heat pump. I just want to say, please get your vodka bottle ready and take a shot for whenever anybody says heat pump. Heat pump in 2020. That's the. I mean, when the dictionary does word of the year. Yes. And I think 2020 had been lockdown. 2021 surely was heat pump, at least in the words of Coronation Street fans. Pump. So, what's happened in 2021? Paul gets a community order for the assault on this guy. And while he's out at court, Todd takes advantage of the situation by getting Will to smash up Billy and Summer's flat. And this is after Billy had just got this lovely piano, and then Will comes in there, starts smashing it up. I think it was Summer who interrupts him. runs out of the street because she's found her flat being burgled into, gets hit by a car, possibly the first of many
sleeping moments
on the floor. Yeah, but she has quite a deep connection with the ground around 21, 22 time did Summer. Billy blames Paul because he was the one that brought Will into their lives and says, right, get out. My daughter Summer is in a coma now or whatever because of you. Off you go.
Billy.
So Paul has to leave. He quits Underworld, starts working for Ed as an apprentice labourer, and then finally moves into the corner shop flat with Daniel.
Isn't this when he didn't know what he was doing and he went round and he was trying to fix Daniel's plumbing?
Yes, I think he was. He was a proper apprentice. He didn't have a clue.
Literally did not know what he was doing.
And that was why it was quite interesting for him to get this MND in the end, because one of the first signs that something was wrong for him was that he had a bad hand, and then Ed had to let him go from the builder's yard. But anyway, Paul tries to make Billy think that he's seeing someone else so that Billy will get jealous. Which kind of just leads Billy into realising actually he still does fancy Paul. He's still got feelings for him, although he'd also taken up with Todd by this point. However, when Todd decides to leave, Billy realises I do want to be with him after all, which annoys Paul. So this was ultimate love triangle territory.
What makes Billy so great?
Everyone wants to be with Billy, There's been times when Paul's been flavour of the month, other times when it's been Todd, sometimes it's someone else entirely, but it seems like at all points somebody wants a slice of the
Billy.
Mayhew.
Delicious
Yeah.
peach pie.
Yeah, they just need that bit of vicarly archdeacon. It's because the position of power, clearly.
Yeah, exactly. Who would not want to be close to somebody who's got the ear of God?
Exactly this. So Paul is
front seats at all the Christmas carol services.
You mentioned earlier about the three gay dads, and that was quite a funny thing. But I really did enjoy seeing Paul being a father figure to Summer, and as someone with, and I know that Summer's not Billy's biological daughter, but it did feel to me a little bit quite funny seeing Paul, who's someone that's 5-6 years younger than us maybe, with such a grown-up daughter. I found him being a dad to someone that he's not a million years apart from an age really quite nice, and it did show that he was growing up, because she's going through all these problems with skipping school in the wake of Seb's death, and he also gets her to change her mind about insulin injections, which she's not too fussed on when she first gets diagnosed with what was it? Diabetes. I forget, what's the one where you need an insulin?
What's the one where you fall over all the time?
And yeah, so I think that Summer and Paul worked well, because he was a little bit of rough, but he was like, I think Billy to Summer was the main dad figure, and Paul was like a friendly uncle, I suppose.
Okay.
And so I thought that they had a lovely little relationship there. Will's still not gone yet. I wasn't really fussed about the character of Will, so I didn't really enjoy when he kept coming back, but come back he did. And he's blackmailing Todd for £5,000, otherwise he's going to tell them about this scheme they had at the
what can they do about that?
At the hotline last year. So Todd's like, £5,000, how am I going to get out of this?
What's worth £5,000?
Heat pump.
A heat pump?
Yeah, a heat pump. So this was, Paul's story has helped educate me on a number of things.
Right.
I will hold my hands up and say I didn't know much about MND before last year. Didn't know all about it, but now I feel that I'm a bit of an expert. And similarly, heat pumps. Never knew that was a thing, but I certainly did in the summer of 2021. So Billy's has got this heat pump that was, I think it was bought with church funds to go into the archdeaconry, which is now for ex-cons, and it's been stored at the builder's yard. So Todd decides that he's going to steal it. I don't know how he manages to get into the van, but
they're very small,
so that he can get this £5,000 to pay off this 14-year-old boy that's got him by the short and curlers.
Honestly, him and Joel, they're supposed to be villains, and they're getting like
I know.
teenagers who just
You're right, actually.
give me money.
Yeah.
Do you think there's somebody on the Corrie writing team who's scared, deathly afraid of teenagers, or maybe it's a cry for help and they're being blackmailed by teenagers continuously, and they're trying to write solutions for themselves? Maybe someone on the writing team was like, "We've got to get our heat pump. Don't ask me why. I just need a heat pump. I need to sell it for
I'm
£5,000."
starting to wonder if it was product placement by the heat pump factory.
The heat pump.
Anyway.
People.
Shut up. So, Todd's stolen this heat pump.
I just imagine at the end of the year, Peter Ash going, "Yes, I did go to a charity for heat pumps and spoke to some of the people there about how important heat pumps are to their lives. And it really made me realise that heat pumps are the future of heating in this country, and that everyone should have
a heat pump." Right, so he's stolen this. Paul is initially arrested and blamed for taking the blame for this, or given the blame for this, sorry, and Billy says, "Well, I'm going to resign as archdeacon because this heat pump was for the halfway house. We bought it with church funds and now it's gone, so I've got to leave the church."
Makes no sense.
He's always going back and forth to the churches, Billy.
I know, Jesus
he needs a bit of commitment,
Jesus is disappointed
really.
here. He's like, "It's got nothing to do. I don't understand. Imagine if my disciples had been so flaky, Billy. There wouldn't be hardly any books in the Bible, would there?"
Well, it doesn't last long because Todd goes back to the church and says, "Look, can I unresign my partner Billy, please?" And it seems to work. So Billy then gets...
They're very forgiving, aren't they? I suppose it is very church-like of them.
So Todd then gets an advance on his wages from George to pay for what the halfway house needs. And he also uses some money to pay off Will, who secretly records a conversation with him about how they plotted to split up Billy and Paul the previous year. What a sneak. This recording was then played by Paul at an event to put up for the launch of the Naked charity calendar, which was a bit of a weird storyline that summer holiday, which saw the likes of Kevin dress up in nothing but a cowboy hat and Kev posing in front of a particularly hairy Kiwi. But
Kev?
No, Dev.
Yeah.
Kev in a hat, Dev in a Kiwi.
Yeah,
easily confused.
It was a weird time. We'd just come out of lockdown. COVID was still around, and we were all losing our minds.
This was a bit of an odd story, but they have a big launch for this charity calendar, and that hardly anyone turns up to. And Paul has got hold of the recording from Will, and he plays it in all its glory for everybody that was there to see. No. Billy realises what a wrong un Todd is and dumps his ass, and that's the end of that. That's really the end of that. There was a little bit of stuff later on in the year as well, with Paul suspecting that Daniel was grooming Summer because Daniel had been sneaking Daisy back to his flat, and he'd also
mixed messages.
I think he'd also been coaching Summer, hadn't he, or mentoring or tutoring her or something. But anyway, nothing really came of that.
Well, it set Max
off on his path of mischievousness. But anyway, this story kind of came to a grinding halt with Todd being outed as being a master schemer, as if people, they probably should have known already, and a massive breakdown in the relationship with the three gay dads. Then the characters don't really appear very much on the screen, and the next time that we see them in any meaningful story in 2022, they've made up. So I don't know what happened there. I guess they just calmed down. They all got all hot under the collar by the heat pump, and 2022 comes around and they're like, let's just be mates again.
You can use a heat pump to cool things down, so maybe they found that button.
Maybe they did. So 2022, we saw Paul in 77 episodes, which was he didn't really have much to do, did he?
No, but it was more than he'd been in for the previous year.
Yeah.
But it was mostly as an accessory to Summer's, swooning.
Multiple dramas from Summer in 2022, and Paul was just there as I'm in the background and I'm going to pick.
Yeah, he was just supporting Summer. He thinks she's being led astray by her new boyfriend Aaron. They make some hash brownies, which the bishop
Aaron and Summer do
accidentally eats. So he confronts Aaron, gets a punch in the face. Billy stops Paul from reporting him to the police and tells him, "Oh no, Aaron's very troubled.
He's got a drunken father.
He's got a troubled background and also a qualification from culinary college. So, of course, he was going to make hash brownies. What else? Summer realises she's pregnant. Then she considers an abortion because everyone's bickering about it, which seems a bit dramatic. But hey, it's her choice. I say it's her choice. Don't have to worry about it in the NDB. Daniel moves out of the corner flat in number 1, and Dee Dee becomes Paul's new flatmate. Right. That's all that really happened.
Yeah, very, very little in 2022.
Lots of things happened to other people, and I'm very hazy on the details. I don't remember what happened with Summer's pregnancy, apart from they tried to buy it. I don't know.
I think she just had. I think she just had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
There was a story about she wanted an abortion, but Billy didn't want to support it because of his
religion,
because of his faith. I don't know, but
I don't remember.
Anyway, yeah, it was 2022 was a bit Paul light because I think it was setting up for the next year. So everything that we've had so far about Paul was there are no storylines really that we've spoken about there that really make me go, oh, that was a great story, you know?
Yes.
And that this is one of the reasons why up until 2023, Paul wasn't particularly on my radar as being that fantastic a character. I didn't have anything really against him, but I don't think that they'd really given him a story that just got my pulse racing. But that all changed in 2023, which is the start of the MND story. Now, like I said, I knew next to nothing about MND before this story came out. I mean, Stephen Hawking had a form of MND, didn't he? And I think that was most people's kind of main experience. Obviously, there's the rugby player, Rob Burrow, who passed away a couple of months ago, that some people knew about as well because he was diagnosed in 2019. But I didn't know anything about it, and when Corrie announced that this story was going to take place, like we said earlier, I just had a little bit of trepidation. Is this going to be a miserable story? It's obviously going to lead to the exit for Paul. I didn't really know what to think. It was announced on the 23rd of March 2023. And Peter Ash said at the time that Paul was completely blindsided by the diagnosis, that he's deciding to keep it from his family and friends as he tries to come to terms with the news. And that seems to be quite a thing on Coronation Street, isn't it? Not telling your friends and family that you've been diagnosed with something, like we'd seen it with Tim and his heart condition a couple of previous years. And even recently, Toya's decided to keep the news of her pretty serious medical condition from Janice. So I was like, oh, it's just going to be more secrets. Oh, I'm not really sure about this. But yeah, Peter also said that he knew very little about MND before embarking on the storyline, but he did have the support of the MND Association. And the MND Association, I was listening to the ITV Pridecast today because they had an interview with Dan Brocklebank and Peter Ash, and they spoke about how almost in an unprecedented way, Coronation Street has taken on the MND Association and almost affiliated themselves with them, and the work that they've done together and the amount of money that's been raised, they've put adverts together about it. That's been a really, really successful partnership, and the MND Association must just be over the moon, the amount of exposure that this storyline has brought to the condition, because I think a lot of people don't know much about it or didn't.
No, but they can also take that and use it to make actual concrete changes and turn it into good things for real people, raising money for different aspects to help support people with MND, but also to try to help research.
Yeah, and I think that raising awareness of this condition has been quite important, because even with, and I don't want to belittle in any way the other issues story that Coronation Street do, but people know about cancer, so when stories have when there's stories about that and say we want to raise awareness of it, of course it's important, but we know about it. There's so many things like that, but MND, I honestly think that genuinely it was a bit of a mystery, and it's really helped me to think differently about, if I were to see somebody who'd had the condition, I'd kind of make me think, well, you feel like you know a bit better, I mean, especially the fact that they look like they're in a wheelchair and they can't respond and they can't move, but knowing now that inside they're completely healthy and their brain is working perfectly, it's been really quite an eye-opener for me.
The other thing about it is, in America it's known as Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS, and we had the Ice Bucket Challenge, which was a viral internet thing that I can't remember when they first started happening, but...
Feels like it was kind of pandemic
It feels
time.
like... No, it was way before then.
Oh, was it?
I feel like it was.
I don't know.
Well, that was the only time I'd ever really heard of it. That was 2014. So.
Oh, well, I didn't realise it's not. Even then, I remember the Ice Bucket Challenge, but I don't remember particularly thinking this is why people are doing it.
About MND or ALS? Not really. No,
it was more. Let's have pictures of people putting ice over their heads.
Sorry, but I think it was a bit silly. But it does go to show you again. Earlier I said about the power of soaps. It's the same. This is why it was such a strong story and why it helped. It's helped people understand MND better because it's like someone know's got it.
Mm. Yeah, for sure.
And using that power to transform people's lives for the better who have MND is such a special thing. And the thing, we talk about issues-based storylines and they can be very heavy and sometimes they're clumsy and sometimes it feels a bit like, there's several of them going on concurrently in Coronation Street.
Some of them can feel a bit preachy.
And sometimes you have stories that are issues where before they wouldn't have been like, it wouldn't have been a big deal or would have even been funny, but because they've partnered with a charity now, it's it's super serious and etc. That's happened before in Coronation Street. This MND thing, I think, is such a great example of how it was done right from start to finish. And I just want to say also, Peter Ash, imagine taking on the huge responsibility of portraying this in a soap in front of people who don't know anything about it, but also in front of other people that do intimately know what damage it can cause and how it ruins lives. Because Daniel Brocklebank's grandfather had MND and died.
Yeah, and Dan was an ambassador.
Yeah.
He'd been working with the MND Association for 20 years, and he was speaking on this ITV podcast saying that when the story was mooted to him and Peter, he said, "Oh, is this because of my association with the charity?" And Coronation Street genuinely had no idea. So it was absolutely brilliant as for Dan to get out there and get the word about MND and raise the awareness of it.
I think they probably should have known that.
Well, I don't know, but it also meant that they had to get it right. Both of them had to get it right, and I really, really feel that they did. And when this storyline was announced, I thought, oh yeah, I'm not a huge Paul fan. I don't know whether I'm going to enjoy this because I think they're probably going to try and make me feel sorry for this character that I don't have any really strong feelings for, but it totally worked because, like I said earlier, I've been just a total Paul convert through this story, and Peter Ash has just consistently bowled me over and blown me away by the strength of his performance. I've never met anyone with MND before, but by God, I agree. I believe that when I'm watching Coronation Street that Paul's got it. He's absolutely superb. And I was saying earlier that Corrie doesn't often do, even though it might feel like it does, they haven't had many stories where we've literally seen a character get a terminal diagnosis and die. But even when they have, it's often a case that they just kind of get weak, and that's it, and then maybe a bit forgetful or lie in bed and look a bit pale. And I don't want to again downplay the performances of the likes of Julie Hesman-House or Katie McGlynn. They were fantastic. They were fantastic in it, but
there's
what
a physical
Peter Ash had to do here, and I didn't think that they'd do it. I thought, maybe they are going to kill him off early. We talked about ideas like, he's going to sacrifice himself by jumping in front of a car. But I'm so glad that they didn't, because I never would have believed that they'd be able to show it as convincingly as they did. And it's just been absolutely incredible. But Ian McLeod, the producer, did say early on that they were committed to doing this. He said back in March 23, "We're committed to portraying in a long-term, sensitive way the effects of this condition on Paul and his family and friends, not shying away from the sometimes painful reality of what his life will be like." So I'm so glad that they decided to follow through with this and show it through to the bitter end, because people that are diagnosed with, or when people are diagnosed with MND, I think the statistic is something like 50% of them die within 18 months, or it's something along
Well, it kills
that.
a third within a year, and then more than half in 2 years after their diagnosis.
Right.
And
so Paul's 18 months does kind of tie in with the average, I suppose.
6 people in the UK are diagnosed every day.
Yeah, and 6 people die every day as well, so it's kind of it balances out, and people.
Michael.
Well, no, I'm just saying it. We're not getting more and more people getting the condition, because again, I was just on the podcast. Dan was saying people have sometimes said to him, or it feels like more and more people have got MND now than before, and he said no, we're just understanding it more.
Okay.
And even his granddad, when he had it, it was barely any time at all between the diagnosis and when he passed away.
So an earlier diagnosis obviously helps you to adapt.
Yeah.
And more accommodations can be made for you, which will make you more comfortable.
Which we've seen an awful lot of with Paul.
And are they able to prolong people's lives after diagnosis more now?
I don't know.
Because I didn't listen to this podcast.
I don't know whether they said anything about this.
Okay.
But they certainly understand it, and we've seen, I guess, a rapid growth in the technology that's helped people be able to communicate. Because when you're locked in your body and your brain is still perfectly functioning, I mean, this machine that Paul has been using to communicate, this is a real thing. And the book that he had to read to record his voice so that his voice communicator could sound like him. It's really, really incredible stuff, and it's such a cruel disease, MND. But the fact that, you know, over the last few years they've been able to develop some things that have helped people cling on to a bit more of what's been them is only a good thing, and that's why I'm so pleased that this story has been able to raise so much money for MND and so much awareness, so that hopefully, you know, they're committed to finding a cure, but in the meantime they're doing everything they can to raise the quality of life of people that are afflicted by this awful condition. So this was kind of where I was at the beginning of 2023 with this story. A little bit wary, a little bit thinking, oh, we're going to be seeing an awful lot of Paul, but I didn't realise, but I very quickly learned just how brilliant a choice of character, of family, of condition that this would be to make a storyline out of.
Yeah, I agree. But I do want to say, I don't want to downplay anybody in this at all, but I do think that Coronation Street's cast is so great, and I don't think they often get a chance to show their chops. I think that there are many different families they could have chosen to do this storyline. I don't know why they picked Paul particularly, but I'm glad they did. I wouldn't want to change anything. I just want to point out that very often people take Corrie's cast for granted, and don't, you know, appreciate how fantastic they are. No, I certainly wouldn't have ever said, oh, if you're going to give a dramatic storyline, give it to Paul because he'll be able to do it.
No.
Because what had really they given him before? You know,
I mean, I suppose the
initial story.
Yeah, with Cal.
But I just think it just goes to show the talent.
Yeah,
that's on screen at all times, really.
Yeah,
and you know, I think also the Winter Brown's family was in decline. Unfortunately, Gemma had some very heavy years where she'd been in it loads. People didn't really like the quad stuff.
A bit oversaturation.
Yeah, but Bernie, I think this has been the making of her as well. If you want to talk about character transformation, Bernie'd always been a kind of a fun character, but she also had a kind of meddling side, and she wasn't always necessarily played as like a, you know, an angel.
No.
Especially with the cow stuff, because she just meddled and made it worse there.
Yeah, I think that for me, Bernie has 100% come into her own with this storyline, and she felt like a character that I really, really wanted to like, but for something it just didn't click with me, and I think it was because she was a little bit sneaky in some ways, and it felt like there were, and I know she's nothing really at all like, you know, Janice or Scylla or that lot, but in my head I kind of put her in the same box, and it's like, oh, they're just trying to bring back this character but as somebody different. But this has just been absolutely lovely, and Jane Hazelgrove has this has been by far her the work that I've most enjoyed, and I hope that my positive feelings that I'm feeling towards Bernie stay. Although I think that I'd started to come over to Bernie's side a little bit before this story, because I think, wasn't it 2022 when we had the story with her and Fern, her doppelganger, and that was fun.
Yeah.
And it gave Jane Hazelgrove a chance to kind of get into a bit of a comedy story, but this was the heavy drama for her. So as the storyline started, I was thinking, well, I'm really interested to see how they get Bernard to react to this, because she's not always the best mum, and she can sometimes be insensitive, and the same with Gemma as well. We'd always been a big fan of Gemma, especially in her early days, but even we'd kind of felt that she was on the wane, and I thought this could be the story to really show what Dolly Rose Campbell is capable, and in every single aspect, I just think that this story has been totally successful. It's gone above and beyond my expectations.
I can't think of anything bad to say about it.
I really can't. Oh, well, the occasional divergence away from Paul, like I know the laptops element of the story some people weren't too keen on, and sending Bernie to jail, some of it felt a little bit like a few too many wrinkles for it, but the core of the story, this poor guy on the decline, and we see the hands stop working, him needing to have a cane, going into a wheelchair, getting his food blended up. It was perfectly paced, that element, I thought, and the love story as well with Billy. So early on in 2023, Billy and Paul get back together again. I think it was in the wake of Paul punching again. He's quite handy with his fists, is Paul. He punches Mike Hargreaves in the face, who's the creepy guy that had Summer locked up in his house that one time. But I think that, doesn't Todd take the blame for that, and then Billy splits up with Todd and then gets back together with Paul? Whatever happens, Paul and Billy are an item pretty early into 2023. So Paul is going through a stage also when he's being very, very benevolent, because Gemma's having cash problems again, and Paul says, look, I'm going to bankroll you, I'm going to help get you out of this, I'm going to work my little socks off until I can help my sister out. And
well, he wants to help them set up their Chesburger business, which Chesney doesn't care about anymore.
No.
I think that he should name a burger after Paul.
The pulled pork burger.
Oh my god.
So we certainly heard a lot about Paul porking this year, didn't we, with Billy? That was an important aspect of the storyline. So it all starts to go wrong. Well, Paul starts to realise that there's something going wrong when he gets knocked off that motorbike that Peter earned. He'd earned it in his trading sequence, exactly. And he starts realising that he's having trouble gripping with his right hand. He's initially told that it's a crushed nerve here, and this is when Ed has to let him go for the yard. That means he's not able to support Gemma financially anymore, so he decides to sue Carla for compensation for her insurance, which is the advice that Dee Dee gives him.
Well, yeah, because she was drugged up, wasn't she? From
Carla was, yeah.
Was that not Stephen?
Stephen drugged up Carla, but anyway,
she drove a truck into somebody.
Paul is feeling that he has to sue Carla to get the money to pay Gemma off, but Peter comes along and offers him a £15,000 payout if he drops the case against Carla. And again, following Dee Dee's advice, Paul's like, I think I'm going to say no to that, because I'm going to get more if we're able to take this to court. But he does take a bank loan to help Gemma to tide her over until the compo claim comes through. This is used to pay for Gemma's wedding venue. Basically, Paul's just getting money from places that he's going to eventually have to pay back, in the hope that he's going to get this massive windfall from Carla's insurance. Exactly. Things start to take a turn for the worse, though, when he gets a neurology scan that showed that the problem in his hand is nothing to do with the accident that he had. So then he has to cancel the claim against Carla. So now he got no chance of compo coming in. He's got a loan. He's not able to work. He does a few little filing jobs for Dee Dee, doesn't he, for a bit? But he is having major cash flow issues. And then he's told he's got MND. So it is, the beginning of 2023 was just a pummeling in every direction for Paul. But he keeps the news for himself until a specialist can confirm it. In the meantime, he's trying to get money to pay off his many loans by stealing cars for this Niall. Do you remember him? He was an associate of Damon. That was an odd little kink to the story.
This was when I was criticising this storyline, because I said, just like with every other storyline, Coronation Street can't help themselves. They got to pile something else on the top. And instead of it being a really interesting storyline about MND, now it's just a story about somebody being a secret criminal. And luckily it didn't last very long.
No, it didn't.
It really just goes to show the power of focusing and keeping it simple.
I mean, it was a little bit exciting to think that Paul was around Rufus's house because he steals Rufus's car, doesn't he? I think this on the night that Stephen murders him. But I don't think anything really came of that. I didn't like that part of the story, I suppose.
It was a bit silly.
Yeah, but it hadn't really got going. It's not until the springtime when he gets, the M&D is confirmed, and he's told that he could have as little as 3 years to live, that this storyline really kicks off. So he's still trying to keep it a bit on the down low, because Gemma's, bless her, preparing for a wedding at this point, and he doesn't want to spoil that. So he tells Dee Dee, who's acting as his lawyer for these car theft charges, but no one else. He realises, just to compound his monetary woes, that this condition isn't going to, is going to cost him. He meets up with somebody whose husband had MND, and she makes a big thing about, you're going to need a stair lift, you're going to need adaptations in your home, the adaptations, and it's going to cost. So he's like, I'm going to start stealing another car for Niall, but that's when he stopped by Dee Dee. And I remember there was a scene in the Fresco car park where she he takes the keys out of the car or something, and he's eventually realises that he can't just keep going down this route. Do you remember the scene when Damon had Paul holed up in Scally's Alley in the precinct, and because Paul hasn't stolen this car, but then when he realises that Paul's got MND and he lets him off, doesn't he?
Because
Damon has a bit of a heart, and then he gets beaten up himself.
Niall or whatever is they're in cahoots, him and Damon.
Yeah. So Damon gets beaten up because he didn't beat up Paul, but Paul is getting beaten up from the inside by this MND, much worse than anything that Damon could do. Conditions worsening as the spring goes on. He starts to lose the use of his right foot. Every now and then I just want to stop and say how brilliant Peter Ash was in showing this physical decline. From the wobbliness when he has to use that to the speech when he can't speak. Everything was spot on, and I think that all of the work that he did, the research, the work with the MND Foundation certainly helped. But anyway, Billy finds out finally about the MND when he attends Paul's sentencing, which Paul had tried to keep hidden from him as well. And he learns, and Paul gets this suspended sentence because of his condition. That's how Billy finds out that it exists. Paul vows, of course, to support Paul as much as he can, but Paul does not want to let Gemma know yet because the wedding is imminent. And this was a really tough episode because the wedding itself was so much fun, wasn't it? Gemma with her big orange dress and all the quads in their little outfits, the disco.
I think this storyline really came into its own on the wedding.
I think so. The bits that had come beforehand with the car stealing, I wasn't too keen on. It was a bit
unfocused and a bit, desperate for I don't know, sensationalism.
And even the money side of things, I think I was starting to think, another money problem.
Yeah, it's just literally the same as everything else. The M&D storyline turns into a storyline about money. And I know that this is going to be a major issue for lots of people who have or are living with MND. That there is a financial aspect to it, which can be awful. But Coronation Street has done so many of these storylines. There's something unique about MND. There's nothing unique about the money side.
Yeah, quite. Well, this was also the part of the storyline when, because the family and friends found out about it, that everyone was able to rally round him and show their love and support, and that's what I really appreciated in a time when it feels like there's so much crime and nastiness and blackmail and trickery going on in Coronation Street, and everybody's kind of out to get each other or get one over someone else. This storyline, the MND was the villain. The MND was what was being horrible, and everybody involved in the storyline around Paul was just being so lovely and supportive and happy to him, and it was heartwarming and lovely, despite the fact that it was a storyline about this terminal condition. So he goes along to the wedding.
Well, he wasn't going to.
We wasn't going to go. He didn't want to spoil it at first, but little Joseph,
walking.
Yeah, little Joseph buoys him on to going, and he walks Gemma down the aisle, which is lovely. But mid-speech afterwards, he bursts into tears, runs out of the room, and when Gemma and Bernie find out, this is when they learn about the condition as well. And Gemma and Chesney even donate their Anglesey honeymoon to him and Billy as well. On their return, Paul finds out that Bernie is already trying to organise a collection for him, as well as his personal independence payment, and that really ticks Paul off because he doesn't want to be seen as a charity case just yet. And that this all makes sense because he's probably been doing a lot of research about this, Paul, realising that, you know, when he comes towards the end of his life, he's going to need, you know, round-the-clock support and help, but at this point he feels like he still does have a level of independence and he doesn't want to be written off yet. So he really struggles with his anger, and he's, you know, mad at the universe for giving him this disease, and now everyone's trying to take over his life. But they're just trying to help him. And Bernie was brilliant for this, because it's later on in the year we get to see her like trying to do a crystal therapy on Paul as well, don't we? which is a nice little side therapy. And that's a bit of a you know, butting heads between her and Billy, because Billy thinks that it's a load of bunkum and she thinks that his faith is. And I thought that was really an interesting aspect to delve into.
To be fair, Billy wasn't trying to cure Paul with Jesus.
No. Billy at this point, he's, you know, it makes sense to him as a faith, in his faith, that he wants Paul to go to heaven, and he knows that Paul isn't a Christian. So he's, you know, not only is he devastated by the fact that his partner's, you know, not long for this world's got MND, he wants him to, you know, convert to Christianity, but Paul is very anti this. And then you got Mum Bernie, you know, in his ear saying, "Oh, let's wave these crystals over you." I really thought that this was an interesting angle to go down, because but it didn't. I think it was quite, in a way, it was quite respectful to both Billy and Bernie's belief systems. You know, in the end, Bernie does have this amazing chat. I think it was the one with Abby where she's saying, like, I didn't really believe this. I was just doing it because I felt that I had to do something. But I think still, it didn't make either of them look like, you know, religious nut jobs in inverted commas.
No, they were just coping with what they knew. You know, their faith.
Yeah. Eventually, Paul kind of does agree to something to try and raise money for him, because he does need the cash. He just doesn't want to be a charity case. So they have this chili eating contest in the bistro. Doesn't Shona do well in that? I think I'm kind of remembering that Shona might have won that one, but I might be remembering wrong. I don't know. But this, when it actually happens, Paul starts feeling ashamed again that he is, you know, everyone's doing all this to raise money for him, and he feels like he shouldn't be taking everybody's money. So
he takes it and
runs away to the hotel, and this is where he meets up with an ex-boyfriend and is tempted to go to bed with him, but realises, no, look, I love Paul. This is just me losing,
acting out.
Yeah, acting out, exactly. So the pair of them just get drunk instead. Sadly for Paul, the guy nicks the money during the night, and but then the next day he returns it because he's read about Paul's condition in the paper. So that's a little bit of minor drama there. This is a part of the story when we're introduced to Shelly Rossington. And we've not even mentioned her so far, but what a star that character was.
She was only in 12 episodes.
Barely, I know, 12 episodes. And this is, you know, when the one episode, a double, counts as two. So I'm sure there was some, like, half episode she was in, but as somebody who was in the show so little, I think she was such an important part to the storyline, such a compelling character. I loved her.
She was pivotal for how Paul learned to cope.
Yeah. Because he'd been just angry about this condition, and fair play, angry is a completely natural reaction to have to this. And if you want to stay angry all the way through it, then you go for it. But Shelley's attitude to having MND was just to say, well, look, sometimes life give you lemons, let's kind of cope the best we can with it. And she just had a really dark sense of humour about her diagnosis, didn't she?
I think her saying would be, if life gives you lemons, suck on them and make fun of the silly face that you make.
Yeah.
Because you can't change the lemon into anything else. The lemon's the lemon. You can't change MND. You can't put sugar on it and make it something nice. You got to just cope with it. They met at an MND support group.
Yeah. And they kind of had a bit of a clash in the first episode, but then they meet again and they just become really good friends. And we see these lovely scenes of Paul visiting her in her flat and just her having a joke and him realising, it's okay to have a bit of dark humour. If you got to laugh, haven't you? Kind of thing. The actress who played Shelley, Natalie Amber, she obviously didn't have MND herself, but she was wheelchair bound since the age of 35 when she fell on stage and got a slipped disc which penetrated her spinal cord. And she spoke about how welcoming Coronation Street was to her. And I only wish that she could have stayed in the show for longer, because she kind of comes in, sets Paul off on a bit of a different mindset. They get talking a little bit about assisted suicide, don't they? I think it was her that puts the idea of that into his head. And Paul moots the idea to Billy, who's obviously aghast at the suggestion that he would help Paul end his life. But it comes in and out of the story over the course of the next year. What it does end up happening in the short term, though, is that Billy and Paul get engaged, and then they end up getting married. I think it was October last year, wasn't it? We talked earlier about the conflict of belief systems between Bernie and Billy, and that raises its head again when Bernie tries to make Paul believe in the afterlife.
This is so silly.
when they have a little dinner to mark 10 years since Sunita died, or a bit later than that, and then what's Bernie do? She turns a picture of Sunita around to face the twins, Ardy and Asha. It's a ghost. Yeah, she's like, I'm sensing orbs, it's Sunita. That was a little bit odd. She's rumbled, but Paul says, okay, look, I can tell that you really, really want me to believe in this. So fair play to him. He promises to be more open-minded. And eventually that open-mindedness lets him take an interest, or more of an interest in Billy's belief system, which I thought was lovely in the end of the day. So Paul's health and mobility is still declining over the summer of 2023, where we are now. He's falling over a few times. There was one time when he was in the precinct with Bryn, he falls over. There's another one where he's getting onto a bus and he falls over. Somebody thinks he's drunk. I think that they must have got so many stories of ways that the public who don't understand MND treat people with a condition. And it made sense for them to show that kind of thing in Coronation Street. So there was also, talking of falling over, there was a couple of scenes. There was one where he falls over in front of the graffiti wall. Do you remember that when we visited that place? That was very well done. And another one, he goes to Manchester Pride, and although we didn't see this, we learned that he falls over at the Pride, and then we see him coming back to the pub accompanied by these 3 drag queens, which is so much fun. And it was a perfect example of seeing the light and the fun and the colour in such a bleak situation that Paul is in. And then we get you get the skinny dipping scene where Paul and Billy decide to go off to the lake one day, and I think it was probably Paul's idea to strip off, and that's a scene that could have not worked for me, but it was really beautifully shot. The writing was just right. Peter and Dan's performance is superb, and it's a really lovely romantic moment without being at all racy or it was just this couple out in nature, out in God's green earth, as Billy would put it. It was lovely. Although it must have probably been quite cold. Apparently, they were almost naked when they did it. They just had a couple of flesh-coloured short pants on. So Paul and Bernie discover after this that Shelly is buying laptops on credit because she knows that she's not going to have to pay them back because she's not going to make it that far. But they can be sold on now. So this is her way of getting money to fund whatever it is that she needs to buy. Bernie agrees to help her out with the sales on this. Now, Dev and Paul aren't too happy about it at first, but when they realise that Bernie's doing this to help Paul's care, basically, they agree to turn a blind eye. This bit of the story, I'm going to say they probably could have done without. What do you think?
Yeah, I didn't. I think, again, it was a distraction and a bit of a red herring too, because Bernie gets involved in this and,
It was really, I was thinking, Bernie, why would you take this risk?
No, but that's what Bernie's like. That wasn't...
She's like it, but this is her son's life on the line, and she ends up getting sent to prison. It turns out to be, skipping ahead a little bit, she goes to prison for, a couple of months, and the story's almost on hold while she's away, so it doesn't particularly affect anything at the end of the day, and I don't even think Paul had hugely declined while she was in prison.
It felt like a filler.
It did a little bit. I mean, they were saying on this other podcast earlier that when the story started, Pete was saying that they didn't have a definite time scale for how long they wanted it to be. They just wanted it to kind of be enough that it felt right. And yeah, there were one or two aspects like this that I didn't hate them or anything, but it felt like it detracted a little bit from the story of the real life
story.
Living with and obviously seeing the home life and the romance between Paul and Billy.
Yeah, that was the major part, and a lot of the story here, we're reading out the story and we've been praising it and saying, oh, this story was great, and then we're reading bits out going, oh, I didn't like this bit, or this bit, I didn't really see the point of this bit. It wasn't really the plot so much that made this so great. It was the day-to-day, everyday scenes and the interactions and the humour and the jokes that Billy and that Paul found, and the adaptations and just the love that grew more strong between everybody in this storyline.
Yeah.
They all got really close, and that wasn't that's not a story.
That was character.
Yeah, that's not something you can put on the front of a soap magazine. Billy and Paul grow closer to one another through using humour. Like that doesn't make a headline, but it does make you enjoy watching the show, and it makes you connect better. And it's a shame that doesn't happen with everybody on the show. In much the same way that a relationship is built up right before they break it, it feels like characters are built up right before they kill them off or they leave.
Yeah. So speaking of getting killed off, this is what happens to Shelly. Her 12 episodes are soon up, and that really came out of the blue. We didn't realise that she was going to die, and that kind of was a bit of a punch to the gut. Yeah. Where I can't remember how it happens, because it gets reported to Paul, doesn't it? He's not the one that finds her dead, but I think he'd been visiting her beforehand and she'd been coughing a bit. It's very interesting to see, what state, if you like, Shelly was in her final week compared to Paul, because she was still talking away. She could still speak, but she had a feeding tube, which Paul never had.
Yes,
yeah, that's right. Well, he did, but I think it just was, in his stomach.
Hers was up her nose.
Yeah, because that's what Natalie Amber had.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, it was. I don't think anyone was expecting her to go quite so quickly, but then that's life, and sometimes these things do happen quickly.
Point,
even Paul's very rapid decline this week kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. But yeah, so that this kind of gets Paul thinking again about the assisted dying, and he confides in Todd about it. We see Shelley's funeral, which was very nicely done. There was another little wrinkle to that when her brother turns up and causes a bit of a fracas. Not necessarily necessary, but that's all over and done with, because up next is Billy and Paul's wedding. And obviously, as Coronation Street's first gay marriage, this was notable for a number of reasons. Also, we saw Billy kind of conflicted with his faith because he wanted to get married in a church. What are your feelings now on the wedding, looking back on how it went down?
I can't remember why they didn't just get married in a church.
They weren't allowed because it was a gay wedding.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget.
I forgot that.
Not allowed.
I forgot. You can get married.
Not the rules.
You can get married. Anyone can get married as long as you're of age, but you can't get married in church, of course.
No.
Well, Church of England church. I'm sure there are other churches.
Oh, yeah.
But, so they get married in the civil... Yeah, I thought this was lovely. It was very tragic, but I think it was joyous as well. They didn't have a POV shot from Paul's perspective.
I think they did when they went to the church.
They
the
did a
bistro
really good
wedding
job.
was everybody around.
Yeah.
And Paul, who is definitely losing mobility
I
at this
can't
point.
believe
I think he was
forgot.
sitting on a chair. Never mind.
I'm
don't
just
worry,
more
it's
open-minded
getting
than the Church of
Why
England.
didn't they just get married?
Gents,
Yeah, that was lovely, but it was the whisking him off because it was a secret, wasn't it? Paul and I think Dee Dee and Summer had arranged behind his back. They'd found a vicar that agreed to perform
Renegade
the ceremony,
vicar.
and they whisked Billy and Paul off, and they had this lovely wedding. And there was the gospel choir there, the Oh Happy Day, and it was perfect for Billy. And I'm really
You never
glad.
got to listen to it.
What?
When he died.
Not when he died, but he did play it on the special episode early this year, didn't
Yeah.
he? A couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. But yeah, I thought that was a lovely wedding, and yeah, finally, after a couple of failed attempts in the past, in the likes of Rana and Kate and Sophie and Sian, Coronation Street got their big gay wedding, and obviously it was tinged with sadness in some way, but I think that overall it turned out very, very nicely. There was just that little wrinkle to it when Summer the
was
dolt
there.
leaves a photograph of the wedding at the church, which
These
gets
kids-
Billy into trouble a little bit.
They don't understand Polaroids.
No, they don't.
Just a quick one. We've said this a lot in the show, in our normal day-to-day show, but not here yet. And that is, I think, the significance perhaps of this being a gay couple, that, a gay man this happened to. Tony Warren, obviously, who was gay and created Coronation Street, and it wasn't until Sean arrived in the show that there was even a gay man in the show.
Yeah, a regular.
And so I wonder what he would... I would hope that he would be really proud of Coronation Street, because so much of what made Paul's story so affecting and so beautiful was his relationship with Billy. And at times, they were very intimate with one another in a way that I don't even think they've done with straight couples. And I didn't think it was supposed to be provocative or confrontational like some of these things can be. Look at this. If you don't like this, then you're a terrible person. It was just all beautiful and natural. It didn't feel like, oh, we're gonna really prove a point here by having the bath scene, which we haven't spoken about yet. It was just a natural thing that happened because of the MND, and so you got to see a part of their life that you wouldn't normally. And I think a lot of people also still probably don't even have gay friends or an intimate part of somebody's life who is gay. So, and it wasn't even a big part of this story. It was
it wasn't at all. I mean,
the wedding part was
gay couple,
biggest...
straight couple, whatever. That it didn't make any difference, and it just felt like they just were.
Yes. And obviously, one of the biggest health challenges that gay men have faced is the AIDS epidemic, and Coronation Street obviously had nothing to do with that. Didn't cover that at all. There weren't the characters to do it with, apart from anything else. But they have had this storyline, and I think that it was nice that at no point did I ever see anybody really making an issue out of this. I think that people have moved on. Really, you still can't get married in a church, which is crazy to me, but everything just felt so natural and unforced. And although you do get people going, oh, Coronation Street's woke, oh, everyone's gay, they're on Twitter, but I think that's just Twitter for you. Do you know? I don't think I'm articulating this very well at all, but I do just want to give props to this being such a beautiful story that hinges on a relationship and it happened to be a gay relationship.
Yeah.
And it led, it was overdue to have a gay wedding. It was 64 years since Coronation Street started. It was about time.
Yeah.
And to have such a significant pair of characters. And I do think that Paul's only been in the show for a short amount of time, but I think he will go down as a very, very memorable character because of this story.
Yeah,
and to be able to be a character that raises awareness of something like MND, but also does their bit for acceptance of gay rights and things like that. That's and he did it. It didn't feel forced at all. That's why I keep coming back to that, because sometimes Corrie can be really clumsy with issues.
But I keep referring to this other podcast that I listen to, and I do encourage everybody. I assume if you're still listening to us after this time, you quite like podcasts. If you haven't heard it, go and listen. One of the other stories was it was related to the skinny dipping scene, and Billy and Paul were there with their picnic, and apparently the people behind the scenes had brought out this very kind of flamboyantly rainbow picnic hamper for Billy and Paul to take on this journey. And Dan Brockabount looked at it and was like, what's this? What's this rainbow picnic hamper? And they said, oh, well, you're a gay couple. And he says,
is this a gay picnic?
So what? And exactly, it's like, here's a gay picnic hamper. And
a gay picnic camper.
A gay picnic hamper. It's a camp hamper.
Yeah, okay.
And Dan's like, no, we just get. I don't need to advertise with absolutely everything that I'm gay, and that this is nothing to do with a gay couple. This is just to do with a couple.
Yeah.
So they ended up swapping it out for something else.
Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway,
who's going to argue with him about that though? No, they were like, quick, just get another one.
They're married. Billy gets suspended from the church for a little bit when it's found out that he got married in the church, and that led to this brilliant scene of Billy on the radio basically lambasting the Church of England for not accepting gay people not letting them get married in church.
Surely they're going to have to
nicely
change
done.
that.
That's really, really nicely
soon.
done.
It
has been under debate. I can't remember when this happened last year. The higher ups at the Church of England were debating it, and I think they were supposed to make a decision, and then it got put back. I don't know.
They're probably all going, oh, good, everyone's forgotten now.
Yeah, maybe they
better not talk about it on that.
But anyway,
podcast.
It all gets sorted. He's back working at the church again after a bit, because he gets forgiven by by his clergy.
Yeah.
So not his not
There's
his
worse
clergy.
people have done worse things in a church than that. I tell you that for nothing.
So Paul starts to use a wheelchair not long after the wedding. He gets the voice box. He gets the book where he has to read and record his voice. He also gets told around this point that he's got 6 more months left to live. I think that did take us to around about Britain's Got Talent week, which is another reason why lots of people thought that late May, early June was when Paul would meet his maker. But he ended up getting about 10 months after getting a 6-month diagnosis. So it's not too bad. Billy and Paul then have this brilliant bath time scene, and there's so many great moments to this story. Up on Instagram on Monday, I put together some little screenshots of some of my favourite parts of this story. Paul and Shelly, the bath scene, the skinny dipping scene, the wedding. It's been so
But just
well
to
done.
say, loads of these moments are just such simple human moments.
Well, this bath time scene wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's basically Paul having a bath. He's getting a bit annoyed that
he's having a moody.
Yeah, because of beginning to there be a lack of intimacy between him and Billy, which was always very important for them. He gets stuck in the bath. Billy comes along, tries to get him out. His back gives way, and they end up lying there on the back in the bathroom and have to be rescued by, is it Todd and Ed who come in?
And Summer comes in at the very end as well. It was great. It was just really funny.
That was so good, and that was another one of these very, very unexpected moments.
Funny. It was hilarious.
Really, really. That was
touching.
I think that was probably, if I had to say a favourite bit of this whole story, I think that half an episode with the bath scene was it, because it was just 2 people there talking. They couldn't move. This is the moment where Paul confesses that he's been secretly going to church with Dee Dee as well, and he got himself baptised, and which was so important for Billy. It was just, really, really perfect episode, that one.
So some shows do this kind of thing, like where two people might get stuck in a lift together and have to talk through their issues. Yeah. The other one that this puts me in mind of all of a sudden is the bit in Corrie where Ken and Mike get tied up together
in the Freshco
Siege, and they have a heart-to-heart in the storage room as they're tied up together, which I think is great. It's just being forced physically into a situation where you have to confront something. That's a sort of a well-used trope on any show, and they did a really unique spin on it in this one, which was very specific to the situation that they were in. And since then, we still have got the odd mention of Billy's back issues, which keep cropping back up again.
Yeah, and I think it's partly because of the amount
of lifting
and hefting things and Paul around that Billy has to do. Anyway, the story kind of...
also, can I just give a shout out to Ed for being supremely uncomfortable but having to go along with it. He was like, I don't know, what is this, a gay thing? Like, he's just having a bath.
The story slows down a little bit towards the end of 23. We have Bernie being sent off to prison because she's caught selling these stolen laptops. Big Garth again for Paul's story. And Paul gets this new helper, Moses, which odd choice because Moses was a really likeable character, but he barely had any screen time, and then he disappeared a few months later, didn't he? I think that was a bit of a shame, really, because it looked like they were going somewhere with Moses and Todd relationship-wise, but nope.
No, forget it. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Samir and Deirdre, because Moses had come to this country, and he
it's from Ethiopia, was it?
And just like Samir, it felt like a bit of a weird relationship, and what could you possibly have in common? But Moses and Samir were both just really, really nice, and you just wanted to... I mean, I assumed that because Moses went to London, I assume he's dead now too, and his organs have been harvested.
Must have been.
Yeah.
2024 then, Gemma, the final year. What's been going on? Well,
there were a few letdowns, weren't there, and setbacks. They hire a motorbike, and he can't get on that. He wants to go on holiday and they can't get insurance because it's too expensive. He wants to go to the loo and he falls.
Oh god, that was a really harrowing. Yeah.
And so Billy's like, I'm gonna have to look after you full time. I'm gonna have to stop whatever it is I do, which, to be honest with you, I'm still not sure about, but they pay me for something. The assisted dying route is still in Paul's mind quite firmly here. The more he loses control over his body, the more he wants to keep control of one thing, which is when he dies and how he dies. So he gets Abby to buy some drugs that he can use for that. Kevin finds out and gets in a strop. Kevin's been in a strop all year about various things that he gets the wrong end of the stick on. Billy finds out about this and he has to promise to Paul that he will help him, and that was a really emotional scene.
That was one of my scenes of the year. I mean, most of my scenes of the year for Coronation Street in 2024 are related to this story, but the moment where Billy has to doesn't have to, he decides to, he agrees to help Paul end his life when the time has come.
He always, I think Billy agreed, but he always in his head hoped that it wouldn't happen, and he was right in the end, I guess. That Paul wouldn't choose that route, and we had always wondered if that would be how it ended, because
I'm so glad it wasn't.
Hayley made that choice for herself, and as much as it seems really, out of order to say you can't have the same thing twice, you kind of can't on a television show, even though it was like 10 years ago.
I think the way it ended was much more preferable to me.
It's a really hard decision to make, and I'm not going to say whether it was the right or wrong one for the Hayley storyline, but I don't think I could have gone through the same thing again with Paul. It was really awful with Hayley as it was. So,
but it still made some great drama in the special episode where it nearly happened this summer.
oh my goodness. So, Paul and Summer play Cupid between Todd and Moses, but no one cares at the end.
Nothing happened there.
Well, we do care, but the Coronation Street didn't send him off to London. Paul, Gemma and Bernie go on holiday in the caravan, and then they get stuck on a rugby pitch overnight, but they discover his plan for ending his life when Billy can't get hold of him and sends them a panicked message. And then they have this, this heart-to-heart, these three family members sort of talking through and coming to terms with... I think the thing about it for Paul's friends and family is it makes it even more real to know that he has a plan for how he's going to die. Like, It's one thing to say, oh yeah, at some point in the next 6 months that he will die, but to know that he's got a concrete plan about it is even more confronting than that. And so they have to come to terms with it all over again. And that was, and then they get woken up by the rugby team.
And Dolly Rose Campbell again had been great during this storyline, and I'm really, really pleased. But this moment where she finds this out was again some of her best work, some of her best dramatic work.
Well,
both her and Sean, who are sometimes maligned a little bit as characters on the programme for
being
not
throwaway.
Caricatures. This showed that I just love the relationship between Gemma and Paul.
Yeah, and I just want to also say again, like I haven't said before enough, that here's where the writing and the storylining strengths are shown, because these are all just really hard to describe why it was so affecting. It's just a simple scenario, but they milked it for everything it had, and just with the characterization and the situations made it more than the sum of its parts. And there were so many moments throughout this, and it just goes to show you also how important it was for them to get this right and to make a storyline that was going to reflect the experiences of people with MND.
Yeah. I wonder how much of the little plot beats, because there are so many, I mean, we're spending so long talking about the 23 to 24, I wonder how many of them were planned out in advance and how many of them kind of came when you were already into it. Like, was there a bit where like, oh, this is going to be the bit where Bernie goes to prison, this is going to be the bit... I mean, in some ways, the story has to follow a particular route, because your decline, I don't know, it might not happen in exactly the same way as everyone else, your physical decline, but you're going to have a time when he can't speak, you're going to have a time when he can't eat solid food. So there'd have to have been some amount of, or quite a big amount, I suppose, of heavy planning for it, and the outcome of the story shows that it was very much worth all the effort that went into it.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it goes to show too the believing in the power of your story to tell itself rather than embellishing it. So when you're thinking back to this story, I think loads of people are going to remember the special scene with from Paul's perspective, or the bit where in the caravan, or the bit where they get married, or the bit where the bath scene. No one's going to remember the bit where Bernie goes to prison. Even though that's arguably more dramatic, and that's a soap magazine headline.
Yeah. There's even the bit that I don't think is going to particularly stick, comes later on in 2024, just this whole return of Denny as a character. I mean, skipping ahead. I mean, we get just lots of little nice moments. There's a proper motorbike scene, isn't there, for Paul, which was lovely, and the barbershop quartet coming to the bistro, which I enjoyed, and then his annoying mate from the past comes and ruins it a little bit. The karaoke, but the swearing on the radio. But yeah, when Denny comes in, it did feel a little bit to me like, is this really needed? It kind of... I suppose Denny's purpose was to introduce the fact that Kit existed. But even the introduction of Kit, I am not 100% convinced that was really, really needed. And Kit has had quite an important role in a number of stories this year. Did he need to be Paul's brother? I'm still not convinced. If he was just a dodgy copper, I don't think that part of the story would have lost anything. I
think it benefits Kit, but I don't know that it benefited Paul's story.
Yeah, because we had there's the bit where Kit manages to convince Paul and Gemma that what a cow Bernie is for abandoning him all those years. And
That was just
I suppose that added heavy drama to, like, you know, Paul's only got months left to live and now he's not speaking to his mum. But I'm
that
not
was
sure.
weak
Not sure.
compared to other things, which again, not quite as bombastically.
And Denny
impressive.
himself was only in the show for what, 2 weeks? Was he maybe? He comes in. He hears about Paul on the radio. Comes in, takes him for a drink. Clearly shows that he's no good at looking after his son. I mean, why should he be? Because he just doesn't know him, and he doesn't know how to look after someone with
MND.
MND.
He doesn't know.
Then he decides to sell Paul's wheelchair, gets caught, and gets sent away with a flea in his ear, and that's the end of that.
Goes, but I have a secret son.
It almost reminded me a little bit of towards the end of Hayley's storyline when her son Christian pops back into the programme for a little bit to add a little bit of antagonistic drama, but not needed at all because the story was doing absolutely fine as the love story between Roy and Hayley.
Paul, backtracking a bit, Paul realises his speech is getting bad when he hears a recording of himself doing karaoke, and then he starts to puree his food. He also starts to use a speech tablet, but it gets stolen when the Rovers gets broken into, and then Brian returns it. That was weird too.
We keep finding things and going, that was odd.
Yeah, I know.
But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. I don't know whether there's ever been a story where we've been nitpicking at so many little bits of it, but it just doesn't matter whatsoever because the overall, everything about my lasting impression of this story was how great it was. One
of the things so Kit comes back into their lives, but he doesn't reveal to Gemma and Paul that they are his brother and sister.
Kind of helps them from afar a bit. Like there was a scene outside the hospital where Paul, where somebody is trying to park in a disabled parking space, but Paul and Billy need it, and then Kit comes and says, "I'm a police officer, sling your hook." Yeah.
Paul starts using an eye gaze machine to speak after he falls down the stairs. That's not related. He gets told by the nurse, you're not going to be able to use your stair lift anymore because it doesn't support you properly, so you're going to have to decide what to do. So they basically decide that they're going to stay in this flat, and he is trapped there now. He can't leave. Kit tells the twins about himself, and they get mad at Bernie, but Paul's like, I can't carry on. I can't die mad at you. We have to get on while I'm alive, please.
Yeah.
So he wakes up one day and he's got even worse speech.
This is the special episode.
And this is the special episode.
This is the hour-long Paul and Billy special.
Before he gets locked into the flat, they have one last day out where they enjoy.
Go to the church.
They just revisit things and reminisce about stuff. There's the bit with David, and he makes foam for him to really smell beer or something. And at the end of this day, which is kind of as perfect as they could have made it, Paul decides that this is the end. I don't want to be here anymore. That's it for me. Billy's obviously in floods of tears, but he agrees to help him, and they're just about to do it.
This was proper edgy your seat stuff, wasn't it?
When Chesney comes in, and this is the only time anyone's ever been happy to see Chesney. But he brings Karis has fallen down the stairs, so they need them to look after the kids while he goes to the hospital.
That episode was that was the one that had the narration from Paul's point of view, wasn't it? It was the inside Paul's head. It had the dream sequence at the beginning where he was dancing. It was such a clever episode, and I don't often like the experimental things on Coronation Street that they do, but this was great.
There's never been an episode narrated by a character before, and we got to hear Paul's internal monologue because
it's so clever.
It was such a clever idea because one of the things you've kept saying that as you're doing all your research and this the stuff you heard from Daniel Brocklebank and things is that your interior landscape in your mind is exactly the same as it was before your body became ill, and so to have him sound completely healthy again really demonstrated that, didn't it, in a really impactful way. And so because Paul's communication was so difficult in his final weeks, because the eye gaze machine took a long time, and they did a really good job too of that. Like the eye gaze machine, you'd have to wait for him to construct something, and there are times when he's working on a very long speech, and you just got to wait like half an hour or whatever, because he's laboriously piecing this together with his eyes. And so you can't have a normal conversation. But during this special episode, he was just there, just saying everything, and sometimes he'd say something and people wouldn't understand, or he didn't really mind that people weren't getting what he meant.
Yeah, because as you said, this was the day when he's really starts to become difficult to understand, but Billy still can, and I think I like that Billy never had much of a problem understanding him, although there was the bit on that episode where Billy thinks that he needs to go to the toilet.
Yeah, and he wasn't
but
saying
that's not
that.
what he was saying at all. He was saying, I love you, and I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things that sets him over into thinking, look, if I can't even communicate with my husband now, what's the point?
Yeah.
But mostly Billy's really been his rock and been a bit of a translator to him. But Peter Ash, again, his performance of somebody who can't really speak has been brilliant, because it in the hands of a less capable actor, it could have not worked. It could have not sounded right.
A big ask. So this episode was dedicated to Rob Barrow, who we mentioned previously, who died in June, who had MND, and he, they spoke with him about it, and Peter Ash said, I learned a lot. I was so grateful under a lot of pressure, especially when it's something that real people live with in their lives. So we just wanted to get that right, really, and be sure that we portray it correctly. And so
I think Rob Burrow was certainly important in helping plot together certain elements of the storyline, and it was the right thing to dedicate the episode to him.
And what a great, again, Coronation Street has really made Paul such a really integral part of this year. The year since he, that if you take a full 12 months for the M&D, once it really started to get going, I'm just so really proud of them for making this was a risk. I think this was a bit of a risky storyline, because, like I said before, Paul wasn't everyone's top of everyone's favourite list of characters, and I know some people even said that they thought this dragged out a little bit, but taking the time to do this properly, I think, has been really important, not only for the show but also for the M&D in general, and to demonstrate the power of a soap to tell a story like this. Anyway,
we're nearly there.
We are nearly there.
It's first few years of this was like...
First few years, yeah.
But full in love with Billy. Todd comes in, meddles a bit. He has a bit of drama. Heat pump. And then it's just been... This story has just gone on and on and on, but in a great way.
So Kit gets to know Paul more, and at one point he's left alone with him and to look after him one afternoon, but he panics a bit when he can't breathe, so he gets Bernie to come, and Bernie helps, and I think this was kind of softened Kit towards her a bit, because she was great with him. Yeah. Then Paul makes this manifesto about how Billy has to carry on in his life and get rid of his pants and get a new man. And Billy reluctantly agrees. He goes out for a night on the town with the lads. And then he comes back a bit worse for wear, crashes on the sofa, and realises when he wakes up that he has lost his phone. And then he has to spend the episode trying to find the phone, and therefore he doesn't get back to Paul in time. Paul struggles to breathe, and Kit's there with and Bernie and Summer, and they manage to get the paramedics. The paramedics take ages to come. When they do, they take him to hospital. And by this point, Paul really can't. I think he's unconscious.
Yeah, I can't remember. They'd said that he developed these clots on his lung or something like that.
And there's that horrible
really
bit.
A case of, we got to make him comfortable, and that's all.
Well, he's struggling to breathe, and Bernie's there, and she's got this tissue, and she's dabbing his mouth, and there's blood all over her hands.
Yeah.
And those final bits were really, really painful to watch. Because you knew that he was suffering, and there wasn't any way to paint it differently, really. It was clearly he was in agony trying to breathe. And so then they end up taking him to the hospital, and they're all gathered around the bed. And,
almost all of them.
well,
Not Billy.
Billy's still trying to find his way back there. I'm not going to go into all the details because it's only just been on the screen, but he is struggling to make his way to the hospital because he knows it's the end. And Summer goes and says her final words to Paul, and then Gemma and Bernie do, and as they're sobbing, Billy calls, and although Paul has already died, they don't let him know that, and so Billy speaks some final words to Paul, who can't hear him. Well, it depends on your belief system, I suppose, but Billy doesn't realise this, and he eventually makes his way to the hospital just in time to see everybody sobbing, and knows that he didn't make it.
And that's about where we're up to, isn't it?
Yeah.
We will go a lot more into detail on that in the podcast this week, but we don't want to end up repeating ourselves twice in a week. But that is the end of Paul. He's done with. We've still got the funeral to come and whatever else there is that's going to be.
There's going to be a fallout.
There's going to be a fallout. There's probably going to be some kind of tribute or memorial. There often is on these big tragic deaths on Coronation Street, isn't there? But time will tell what's going to be coming there. But yeah, we've finally reached the end of this story that I didn't ever want it to end, and I kind of feel a bit empty already that the story's over and that Paul's. And I know there is still more to come.
Well, there's not for Paul.
There's not for Paul, but I hope that they don't. Corrie can sometimes, when a story ends, just say, oh, okay, anyway, that's done. On to the next story.
He's dead now. What do you want us to do about it? No more story.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how this bereavement affects Billy. I'm hoping that, that his mates and David and Todd rally round him. Is Bernie and Billy's relationship still going to stay? What is going to happen to Bernie now? How's Kit going to be involved? There's still an awful lot that could be told, and I hope that I don't feel that this story. I hope that they keep the excellence of this story even just in the aftermath of it. So that's kind of it. There's what
I just wanted to say one thing, which I probably will say again at the weekend, but this scene where somebody couldn't be at their loved one's bedside really made me think of COVID, when so many people had to go through this with their loved ones. They couldn't go to see them. People died alone. I know that Paul didn't, but it just really made me think and reflect upon that period of time when so many people had to go through this. It was awful. And I know that we had some people on our Facebook group talking about it reminded them of being in the room when their loved one has died.
Yeah.
It will definitely bring back memories for people.
Oh, absolutely. The big final breath, again, Peter Ash did it perfectly, I'm going to say, as somebody who has been there when my mum died. It definitely brought back memories there. But for Peter Ash, he's spoken about this and said that the trickiest thing for him was just pretending, or not breathing when.
Yeah, you got to do that.
You got to do that. He said that because he was been asked on various interviews about the physicality of it, and he said that the most difficult part to play was when he was still able to walk and he was going around with a cane, and he said it's been a lot easier
hard,
physically. Yeah. Sitting in a chair, but even then I think that feels to me like you're not going to kind of squidge around, and yeah. So anyway, that is it.
Well, he said he found that when he was in his chair, he said my arm automatically goes into position, and there's a certain amount of muscle memory when you do something so often. The voice has been something I've worked on a lot. I have to speak so that people can understand, but show that Paul is having difficulty speaking. I also feel a responsibility to make sure the portrayal is accurate. I'm playing the role, and for the people who are living with MND, this is their life. They can't get a break from it. Yeah,
and I think Peter has said similar on Twitter even since then. Paul's story is over, but for so many other people it's still going on, and even like when I finish playing it at the end of the day, I can relax, but for people with MND it's constant. But
I think everybody has recognised that Peter Ash has done such a fantastic job. He was nominated for an NTA, and in fact I can reveal to you now, Michael, he has won.
Has he won?
As we recording this.
When we were recording this, I said, Gemma, you got to keep an eye on Twitter, and then I kind of forgot about it. That's good. I've been really kind of campaigning for Peter Ash to win this, and that's brilliant. That's really, really pleased.
the serial drama performance at the National Television Award.
Great, because he was going
deserves it
He was going
so
up against
much.
David Nielsen, and David Nielsen is
He was in
amazing.
prison.
But
Yeah.
I
He was accused of a crime he didn't commit.
I can't fault either of their acting, to be honest. But with David Nielsen, it's like, we know he's great, don't we?
Well,
but
Peter Ash rose to the occasion here.
Oh, that's great. So he got the best newcomer NTA, and now with his exit, he's got the brilliant.
Yeah.
He 100% deserves that. He really, really does.
It's a really hard physical, and I think of, like, for example, Hugh Laurie in a house he walked with a cane, and I think he ended up damaging his body from doing that.
Really?
You can really mess yourself up if you're not careful, if you do it for too long. So, but I guess Peter Ash would say it's a temporary thing compared to what other people are going through. So I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of Corrie and everybody that was involved in the storyline. And not just the writers in the storyline, but the directors too have done a really great job of bringing this all together, and everybody.
Yeah, it's been a brilliant team effort to show what must be when the idea comes in about how about we give him MND, that's gonna. You got to think that you got to do it right, but there must be so many challenges, and like how are we going to portray this? How are we going to do that? And, and the idea of the monologue and and
I wonder how much of this, like you said earlier, how much of this was in the initial pitch, and when this idea was pitched, like who did they think would be the best person for this to happen to?
Yeah. I mean, there's also, I mean, it might have been discussed, like, who do we pair Paul up with for this? Because when this idea came about, Paul was not in a relationship with Billy, I guess, because they were put together just before the M&D diagnosis came along. So they might have said, well, let's give it to Peter Ash. I wonder whether we put him together with Todd. Because Paul and Todd were never a thing.
No.
We do often have swapping of partners, especially when there's a love triangle. And if it's a same-sex love triangle, then potentially everybody could go with everybody else in the relationship. But Paul and Todd, I think that could have worked. Looking back on it, and the fact that right from the beginning Paul and Billy were in a relationship together, I think it did bookend it nicely that they ended up together. But and everything related to Billy's faith, I think, was really important. That you wouldn't have got that with Todd. I mean, they could have put Paul with Sean, for heaven's sake, even. But I think Billy was definitely the best choice here, and it just so happened that Dan Brocklebank working with the MND Association meant that he was able to, he had an even bigger reason to give it his heart and soul. I think. In the grand scheme of things, even though there were aspects of the story that didn't quite work, this is pretty perfect little story. And as somebody who also doesn't really love the medical storylines, this has proven to me that it can sometimes work in a way that's, makes me smile.
Yeah, the thing about this story is that I was praising it all the way through about how there was a lightness and humanity that they brought to it that I never expected to have, and the humour as well, and just the really, I keep saying human, but it's just everybody's trying to get on with stuff and doing the best they can, and I was always waiting for it to get to like another gear of desperate sadness, and it never did.
No, even the final episode, and again we'll talk about this more on the final on this weekend's podcast. I was worried that it might be a bit too heavy and a bit too depressing and sad, and it certainly got there towards the end. But it still the moments with Billy and David outside in the Freshco car park were brilliant, balancing out what else was going on. And I just thought it was fun.
I can't praise this enough, and
it.
I think that Paul will be remembered because of this storyline, and Peter Ash really deserves his accolades, and I hope that whatever it is he does, aside from being in a panto...
He is doing panto this Christmas. He's in Oldham.
Great.
He's doing Aladdin. He's going to be Abanazar.
What's that?
That's like the Jafar character, basically, of this panto.
Nice.
So I think that's kind of funny, him being a villain. I'd quite like to see this.
Yeah, I would actually. December the 12th to January the 4th this year. If you're in Oldham, please go and enjoy.
I really look forward to seeing what Peter does next, and this story has showed just how versatile an actor he can be, and what a thing to have on your show reel.
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, evil baddie in a panto, a footballer, and a guy.
And just a normal guy.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with Paul. He was a bit of an everyman, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, look, we'd better end it here.
This is a really long.
Thank you very much,
profile.
Coronation Street, for this storyline. Thank you very much to Dan and to Peter for making it work so well. I think you're fab. And, well, you know.
It's just
I've
sad.
said it all.
Just sad.
Sad that it's over, but I'm looking forward to talking more about it on Friday. Guys, thank you very much for listening. I didn't expect this to last this long. I know a lot of this was probably a little bit plot heavy discussion, and well, not discussion, just reeling off this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But to be fair,
That's
a lot
what
happened.
Yeah.
A lot happened in this story. Hopefully we were able to balance it out with a bit of a analysis / opinion as well in there. But if you would like to also share your opinion on Paul, write into the podcast. We're conversationstreet@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of Paul. What was your overall impressions of the MND storyline? Are you singing its praises as much as we were, or did it not work for you? Either way, let us know, and we'll give it a read out in the podcast. So thank you very much for listening. Go and have a listen to this other interview with Peter Ash and Dan Brocklebank. We retweeted it earlier today. Pridecast, ITV Pridecast it's called. It's excellent. And that's it. Goodbye.
We also did interview Dan Brocklebank on our YouTube.
Yes, of course, didn't even mention this. We did. We interviewed Dan ourselves a year ago, and we spoke to somebody from the MND Association. This was about 12, 13 months ago. So if you've enjoyed the story, but you didn't hear that one, you want to go and check that out on our YouTube channel as well.
Check it out.
Right, we're properly done now.
Now we're going.
Now we're going. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Ta-ra.